Strap in, folks. Literally. Because we're about to blow your minds. We've had our minds blown pretty consistently for the last week looking into this. Most of you familiar with the Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, Bill Paxton, Gary Sinise, Ed Harris, Ron Howard directed film Apollo 13, but
Is that the same level of all-star cast back then that it is now? Like, was their body of work good enough to look at that as like a dream team before? Or is it look back now, it is like all these guys' careers skyrocketed?
Ooh. I feel like there is some, looking back on it, it seems better, but I don't think it's by much. Because that's a murderer's row.
So what, it was 93?
95, I think.
95?
Yeah.
So probably pre-big for Hanks. Or post-big for Hanks.
Which the effects are amazing.
Yeah.
We're talking Apollo 13 today.
I forgot about space. I forgot about how interesting this was. After the Apollo 11 and talking about the formation of NASA, I kind of put it on the shelf and didn't really think about it. Now we're back.
The most insane thing to me that these episodes put into perspective is, firstly, how just dumb most other people are in comparison to some of the people that are going to be, talked about during this episode. The insane this to me is one of those moments. It's kind of like when we talked about on the Oppenheimer episode. We're just reading stuff and trying in our, lizard brains to put together being like, oh, they're just trying to split atoms and then they rub up against each other and it makes a bunch of friction. To try to even understand how some of the, the flight controllers and everything, their minds work, and then the guys in the back room, it's just like, how? Like, how do you know the gravitational pull of the moon and the closest point you can get to it and what speed you have to be going in order to go ahead and not be captured by the gravity? And then how long and what position you have to burn your thrusters for exactly how many seconds to launch you along this vector, this velocity. And they're using compasses and they're using these little sliding scales and they're just pages of notes that are breaking down these equations. It's just like the collective ability for someone to have the idea, Werner von Braun, hey, we're going to steal you over here. We want you to launch something into space. How does somebody that has the desire to build a rocket or figure out how all that matters just happen to be the person that can actually accomplish it? Or is it the other way around? It's because they have this ability to think like this, their mind just naturally gravitates toward these apparently impossible things.
Like that spot was open in their brain, and as soon as it brought it in, it just knew it. Like their mind was just basically engineered to follow those numbers.
They are the computer, the biological computer designed to do this specific task.
Yeah, these guys knew more about space and the moon than I know about Earth. Like I don't understand.
The astronauts did. That's not even to say what the flight controllers did.
The flight controllers understand what I don't even know how to describe the pressure of the atmosphere on the moon. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know what the pressure of the atmosphere on Earth is.
How did you guys figure that out?
No idea. Yeah. And these guys just kind of know it.
It's going to be an entire episode with just the same phrase of like, how did they do that? How did that happen?
Yeah. I don't know how they could figure it out. I mean,
we're going to try to explain it, and then we're just going to sit here and still be in awe of it. But before we get into the episode, guys, remember, wherever you listen to your podcast, try to rate us as high as you can. Those 5-star reviews have really been helping out. Keep the comments coming. I got to say, the amount of love for the Harry Potter episode, I was nervous as, I still can't swear yet because we're under 5 minutes. I was really nervous about doing that. That's bearing my hole. That kind of episode, that's letting people have a peek behind the curtain about how nerdy I can get into stuff. But apparently, a lot of you have been enjoying it. I'm thankful for it. Keep the recommendations coming, too. If you guys have things that you want to try to have us cover, interesting things that you just picked up on, definitely pass them along.
Yeah, you converted some people. You converted some people that may have been on the edge about Harry Potter to take the jump, to take the leap.
Warner Brothers and J.K. Rowling, whoever she uses as her publisher, they can send me any type of royalties or referral fees that, come up. Yeah, they can send them over this way. Got anything else?
Let's blast off.
All right, so we did Apollo 11, which was the first mission to actually land a man on the moon. We explained all the backstory behind the Mercury missions, the Gemini missions, so we don't have to go back. We get to just kind of talk about Apollo 13, which is good because she's a thick bitch.
We got to backtrack a little bit because this sort of pissed me off that this was how willy-nilly we were treating these missions to the moon. And the amount of time that we were taking in between these blast-offs and going to the moon. And the fact that I did a 180 on this, probably harder than anything. By the time Apollo 13 takes off, nobody cares.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is it more frustrating that we were so just like every 6 months we're fucking putting a man on the moon? Or the fact that after only one time, because remember, Apollo 12 ends up getting, their hiccup was the lightning strike.
Yep.
But it didn't prevent
on
them.
takeoff.
We'd only put 4 people, but because it appeared so easy, I guess, that everyone was just like, oh, okay, so it's just like, I guess we have submarines that don't have to come up. So you're just basically putting someone in a submarine through space. You just have to get them off in a big rocket, but it looks like you guys have got that handled. It doesn't look like the rocket has any problems getting them up there.
No, I think there's also a massive misunderstanding of like the information they brought back was awesome. An everyday person wasn't going to be able to look at that information and be like, oh, I totally get it. I understand. A layman's going to be like, okay, they went up, they collected some rocks, they came back. We have moon rocks now. That's pretty sweet. What else? Did you find aliens?
I touched the moon rock.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, in Houston.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what other things did you bring back that are going to blow people's minds? It's so far beyond the comprehension of an everyday person to really
to understand what goes into it.
Psyched about it. Yeah.
So if we imagine we hadn't done our Apollo 11 mission, so we didn't have at least a basic understanding of what goes into this. Do you think that I can see in that mindset viewing this and as the public back then of being like, oh, this is so simple. Like, why is it such a big deal? Oh, there's another guy on the moon? Yeah, well, it's apparently not hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's fucking weird to say, but this mission was basically a wake-up call to the public. And again, it doesn't get the love that it deserves. The space program doesn't. But a wake-up call of saying oh, fuck, there's risk to this.
Yeah. I think a big thing, though, is how were they going to improve? Like, if you talk about Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 landing in flat surfaces, like we'll talk about, and then Apollo 13 is going next to a crater in kind of this more mountainous area, nobody understands that they're looking for different things that they found in the flat areas.
Water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do? Oh, you guys are going to land up by the mountains now instead of the flat land? There wasn't the cachet about this. And initially that angered me because it was like, they're going to the moon. This is what's going on. Why are you not more psyched about this? Why aren't all the networks carrying this stuff?
It's because what would our basic comprehension be? That's the point I was trying to make. I do that a lot. I think I start a thought and then I just talk myself into another thought. If we didn't have this understanding and just had the general public's understanding of what it took to do this kind of stuff, then yeah, it's something that's, if someone makes it look so simple, you don't have to fathom even thinking about it. You're just like, oh, I don't even think about it.
Well, and in this time period, because again, Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, you have Armstrong as your commander, Aldrin is your LEM driver. LEM is the lunar module. We'll go through the whole reconstruction of how this works.
Colin gets the short straw.
He does. At the same time, he gets to be alone behind the moon with no communication, which kind of seems fun. It's the loneliest place in the universe.
It would be the most exhilaratingly terrifying, making you feel infinitesimal, but at the same time, what does that do to your mind when you're like, I'm out here in the vastness of nothing. I am flying in something that human beings constructed at thousands of miles an hour, but I don't feel like it's thousands of miles an hour. But when I'm on Earth, I can go 60 miles an hour and it seems fast. Okay. So maybe here's the thing. Is it the shine from the public? Like someone touched foot on the moon, but the person like Collins that was up there is like, I can't convince people that was the prime position to be in.
Yeah, I wasn't the coolest person,
but
sounding.
How Buzz has described it and how Neil's described it, I feel like I enjoyed it or I got something more out of it than they did.
If I'm Collins, as soon as I lose radio, because wasn't it like 45 minutes that was the black spot or something like that? First thing I'm doing is getting naked. Who's going to stop me? What's going to happen? I'm going to be the furthest person. I'm going to be the person that's gone the furthest away from Earth. I'm going tribal. I'm dropping my drawers. I'm getting naked. I'm going to be the naked guy that's that far away. Who's going to stop me? Nobody can stop me.
You come back around the other side, and the flight doctor is like, we just got your vitals back in and everything. It looks like your heart was racing there for about 7 minutes. And then you were calm for a bit. And then another 7 minutes of your heart rate going up. Like you engaged in 2 activities.
What happened? Yeah, like 2 minutes before you come back into radio, you're throwing your clothes on real quick and getting ready again.
Getting your shit backwards.
What'd you do for that 45 minutes, Michael? Oh, nothing. Just looked at stuff. There's some cool stars on the other side of the moon. You guys didn't even see them. You wouldn't even know.
Yeah, what could you see out there when you're blocked from the light? Okay, we're talking too much about Michael Collins. Okay. Anyway, so we come to Apollo 12.
Just so the timeline. Apollo 11, the 16th through the 24th, 1969. Their landing base was going to be Tranquility, which was just a very flat area. They had it was the Eagle, that was the LEM, the lunar module, and the Columbia, that was the
command module.
Apollo 12, Pete Conrad was the commander. Richard Gordon was the CM pilot. Alan L. Beam was the LMP pilot. So the third and fourth people on the moon was a guy named Peter Conrad and a guy named Alan Beam. Mm. If you had infinite guesses, could you have ever come up with these third and fourth people to walk on the moon?
No.
I'd never heard of these guys before. There's nothing in my life that would have ever steered me to know those guys and Armstrong and Aldrin, because the first two were the first two.
Yeah. Okay, so to explain, because we're already using acronyms for stuff. So the way that the Saturn V rocket is the really tall one that you see that looks just like a giant missile. Up at the very, very top of it, you have the little antenna that's sitting on top of the command module. That is I'm trying to think how I described it last time. It's almost like a cone, but then also a little rounded at the bottom. So basically a dome at the bottom and then a circular dome.
At the Gravitron. Looks like a Gravitron, kind of.
But upside down.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, upside down, where it's wide at the bottom. Mm-hmm. Okay. You have that sitting on the very top. That's the command module. That's essentially where they're controlling most of their flight to the moon, if not all of it. You then have underneath that, it's basically sitting kind of within a cylinder that has another big-ass rocket on it, and that's what propels you to the moon, and then you burn to go ahead and return.
That's a storage module.
Correct. That's called the command service module. Together, that's what you are basically inhabiting the entire time. That's where you're getting your supplies. That's where you're storing your oxygen. That's where you're storing your fuel. All the critical stuff is in the command service module. Once you get up into orbit, you then have to attach to the lunar module. That's the little spidery lander thing that looks like it's made of gold tinfoil that you always see like in the moon landing pictures. And if you've ever seen like a little picture of the cat, it's weird because its legs stick out forward the direction you're going. So to get it in that position, you can't have that sticking out like that at launch. The thing is insanely, I'm getting a little bit too deep here, but
No.
the thing is insanely delicate because it's only supposed to operate in space uncovered. So it is actually sitting behind the command service module, or I guess below it when the rocket is standing up. And it's wrapped up in this, basically a cylinder.
Yeah.
So what happens is this all goes up into orbit. The command service module actually detaches from that section. They use it to spin around, and then they basically go nose to nose and connect to the lunar module, which then I think it had already discarded the shell, or they pull it out of it. That's right. They have to then back it out of it. They then have to turn, and then that's what takes them. So it's made up of two, three-ish parts. So you have the command service module, which is, I'm going to refer to that as the storage and where the big booster rocket
module.
is. Yeah. Then you have the command module, which is just the cone where all the controls are. Lunar module, which for pretty much the duration of the flight is accessible. No one really spends any time in it unless you're going down there to get things started.
Yeah. Upon re-entry, before this happens, you are going to kick off your service module because you can't have that up there. That exposes what's called the heat shield that takes in all the heat as you're coming down. Mm-hmm. That gets abandoned in space, which it holds your rocket. It holds any extra fuel. The command module
Stuff you've already used up.
Yeah, the command module has 3 batteries that it's supposed to use for any re-entry.
Yeah.
Next thing that happens is you're going to kick off the lunar module because you've already used it in the moon. You can discard it. Normally, it gets discarded in space, too. We're going to talk about why it doesn't necessarily do that here and comes crashing back down to Earth. Mm-hmm. But it's made of such fragile material
that it doesn't get brought back. Remember, that's the whole point of something we're going to talk about. It gets, after they get connected, because the way that it happens is if they have to bring that back, there's no reason. But because it's this thing, it doesn't have the spidery legs because it just blasts off from there when it leaves the moon. It's just the top portion of it that carries them back up. Mm-hmm. It's when you're pointed back at the Earth, you have this big thing in front of you that you don't need to have anymore. They leave that after they get everything transported through, and only the command module and command service module go back to Earth.
I'm pretty sure they discard we'll talk about it then, but I'm pretty sure the service module gets discarded in space, and then they have to bring the lunar back. Because the lunar is the last thing that they have to get on or get off of.
We'll get to it.
Okay.
We'll get to it.
This happens, Apollo 12. We're talking about this happening. It lands in something called the Ocean of Storms, again, another flat land, November 14th through November 24th of 1969. So we went, July 16th was the first blast off. November 14th is the second blast off. So 5 months?
Less than 5 months.
Less than 5 months.
Less than 5 months.
We're going back to the moon in less than 5 months. Apollo 11 works so well that 5 months later, national TV is lining up again. Like, hey, they're going back up.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. That's a wild turnaround time.
The order that they'd placed for the Saturn V rockets to be built, they built 15 of them. Mm-hmm. And they're like, fuck it, we have so many of these things.
Let's
just
keep
start
launching
firing them up.
Yep. Their command module was the Yankee Clipper, which is hilarious because...
the other guys?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's a Yankee Clipper.
You shot Dak Cheetah.
The LM was known as the Intrepid. Apollo 13, April 11th, 1970. Less than a year after we launched Apollo 11.
So it was the 7th crewed mission in the Apollo program, the 3rd, which would be landing on the moon.
In less than a year, the 3rd that would be landing on the moon.
Yeah.
This was as soon as I heard that number, this is kind of where I started to make my turn on being angry about no media coverage.
Yeah.
3 times in less than a year is kind of fatigue.
Do you feel like, because they're making it look so routine, so easy, did you also have any initial feelings of saying, are they taking enough time? Mm-hmm. Are they just sending these guys up recklessly? I had that initial thought and then basically remind myself, this is at a time when there are so many crews that are concurrently training for each mission. You have your main crew, you have your backup crew to that one. But then training behind them just delayed a little bit in their training is another crew because they already have it lined up to be Apollo 17 or 18?
18, I think.
So they have all of these guys picking out the process and having these guys study. At that point, you're like, well, if this is the heyday of NASA, then you know that their funding is just insane. Yeah. And they're just bringing in everybody to be able to start trying to, find astronauts.
Well, famously, we had both of these missions that had kind of critical issues. You had Apollo 11's fuel issue trying to land on the moon and it running short. At the same time, that's
wasn't
pretty
really Apollo, a mechanical thing.
Yeah.
That was somebody not being able to get down to the surface.
And that's what it is. Yeah. When you look at that, you say, okay, just more gas next time. It's an easy fix. Apollo 12, upon takeoff, gets struck by lightning. That follows under the act of God, I guess you would say.
Stop going to fucking space!
But at the same time, you can't really plan for that. They figured out ways around it.
It gets all the way up to the moon, and someone's just like, fuck you, God. you can't stop America.
Yeah. So it wasn't really like they had to go back to the drawing board. They're just like, well, shit, maybe if we put a lightning rod on top and we top off the lunar module with more gas, both of those problems are taken care of.
Anything that went wrong during those other two, they're building into,
quickly. So this turnaround happened so fast. You're going to have the command service module that was known as the Odyssey, the lunar module that was known as the Aquarius. The slated crew was going to be Commander Jim Lovell. This was going to be his 4th flight into space. Lovell. Hey, okay. Lovell.
I'm going to be a stickler for him. Sorry.
His 4th trip into space. Lovell was the command module pilot during Apollo 8 in 1966. So you have a guy that's pretty solid at the helm at the commander spot. Your CMP, your command module pilot, Ken Mattingly. This was going to be his first trip into space.
Well, let's talk about... Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Your lunar module pilot is going to be Fred Haise. The worst way that I've ever seen to spell Haise in my life, Haise. Why not just a Y and an S? It's so much easier. This was going to be his first trip as well. Now, the batting order is going to be changed due to the Germans.
It's been renamed. So, real quick, Jim, God damn it, I almost said Lovell. Don't do it.
Lovell, Chris.
Yes, we got to put the utmost respect on these gentlemen's names. So, Jim Lovell was a naval officer, test pilot. He was 42 at the time. Ken Mattingly, he's 34. Again, was a test pilot. And if you're a test pilot, I'm assuming that you're in the military. You know, you're in some type of Air Force. And then Fred Haise, 37. And also fighter pilot. I don't know if he was a test pilot. So you can obviously see that where these guys are getting pulled from.
Yeah.
Going back to the Germans and the measles. So training behind them, they have another crew of these guys that are pretty much lined up to be the primary crew of another mission. It's not the next mission, is it?
I don't think it was, but this is kind of what we talked about in the Apollo 11. There's a roster of these guys.
Yes.
And this guy named Deke Slayton, who is ahead of all of the astronauts, basically gets to choose the lineups.
The astronaut whisperer.
Yeah, he chooses the commander and both the pilots for each of these. He chooses the backups just in case.
Can you imagine the gifts this man had to have received?
Yeah.
Just the constant verbal.
Probably never paid for a drink in his life.
Lose weight, Deke. Looking strong, Deke.
Never paid for a drink in his life. Got just boxes of cigars dropped off to him constantly, probably. Just any way that these guys could get on these missions. Because this is something Chris and I were talking about before the episode. Astronauts are mentally built different. They're crazy. They're psychotic people. And I don't mean that in a negative way.
They're fearless geniuses.
Yes. They don't have that part in their brain that's like, this is a bad idea.
They somehow get rid of that part. But yes, they are fearless geniuses.
And so when you have backups, I think that there's enough respect among all the astronauts that if you are a backup, you're hoping to go on the mission, but at the same time, you know that somebody else ahead of you is going to have a semi-catastrophic event or a potential disease that's going to pull them away because they are going to fight through whatever they can to go to space.
At the same time, that's also got to be, you got to have that feeling because these guys train together as this cohesive unit.
Yeah.
They know all of their mannerisms. They know what they're thinking. If you have to go up to replace somebody, and you have worked side by side with this other crew, not directly as far as like together as a team, but you've watched them do this. You're doing the same training they are. You've received all the same things that they've received. they were just either higher in the seniority, they exhibited a little bit higher skills. But even as a backup, that's not to say, hey, on the next mission or the one after that, you're going to be a backup. You served as the backup because it gave you the basis to then command or serve as part of a prime crew on a future mission. But leaving that to go into another team had to be, I'm taking this guy's, it's a confusing feeling. I'm taking this guy's spot who I have actively seen going through the same shit and working as hard as me to go ahead and do this. I'm going to a crew who they would prefer that this other guy still be able to. I'm their second choice. I don't even know if I'm their second choice. I just happen to have been assigned by Deke to be behind them. And then when my guys go up, I'm sitting back and watching them.
There's a whole lot to being that new third. There's a whole lot to entering a new thruple and just hoping that you know the exact same. But at the same time, beyond personality, you don't really have much to worry about because you know, and we'll talk about the training. This shit blew me away when I found this out. But these guys are trained the exact same way that the guys that you just left are trained. Mm-hmm. So you're walking into a situation where there's no different real shorthand because everybody has to know the same thing.
As they're walking out of a simulator, you're walking into the simulator to run the same programs. And in case you guys haven't guessed, because we haven't directly addressed it, but yeah, someone actually does get replaced on this mission. So a member of the backup crew got the measles, got the German measles. Because all of them interacted and everything, they had to make sure that the prime crew had immunity. One of them had not had measles before, and during blood tests, because as soon as this measles thing is found out, all these flight surgeons are running blood tests and everything. They find out that Ken Mattingly hasn't had measles before and hasn't exhibited symptoms, but he has like some blood markers or something that are able to identify. Maybe they just didn't want to take the risk, but if he got it, it was going to be kicking in with a fever and all that crazy shit like during the mission, or there was a chance of it happening during the mission. So Deke Slayton makes the decision. And I think, of course, like James Lovell has to, they have to basically be like, hey, do you guys want to sit this one out? You can go on the next one. Like it's your call whether you're going to be part of this mission. So he makes the decision. Hey, me and Fred are still going to go. We'll talk to Ken about not being able to, or Deke can talk to him, but we're going to be bringing up the backup to his position, who is Jack Swigert.
Yep, Jack Swigert becomes the new command module pilot because Ken Mattingly hadn't gotten the measles when he was a child.
And when did the replacement happen?
A week before?
3 days.
Oh, it was 3 days before? I thought it was a week, but
3 days before launch.
And that's where you just have to hope, like, he's a robot, we're both robots, we can make the emotional personality stuff work. It's going to suck. And it turns out that there's some personality quirks between Lovell and
Swigert?
No.
Haise.
Haise, yeah. There's a couple things that Haise does that tend to piss off Lovell, and it's kind of funny when something terrible happens that immediately Lovell turns around and tries to blame Haise for what happened.
Yeah.
But you just have to have this cohesion to be like, all right, 3 days, we got to make the switch.
Yep. So the command module pilot is going to be Jack Swigert. He's 39. He was surprise in the Air Force and a test pilot.
This is Lovell's last ride. This is his 4th trip up. He promised his wife, Marilyn, this was going to be the last one. The last one that he went up on, that I was talking about, Apollo 8, they got to circumnavigate the moon. And Lovell must have really missed his wife because he's looking at the window. He points down to some mountains. He goes, has anybody ever spotted those yet? And they're like, no.
Wouldn't know if they had.
No idea. Free reign, Jim. Go ahead and do what you want. And he goes, I'm going to name that one Mount Marilyn. So Maryland probably had to be stacked, and he was space horny, which is like the second most dangerous horny that you could be.
He was just in love with his wife. And plus, how hard is it to be like, oh, name that after my wife? I'm not trying to do it in a way that's like...
It's the biggest mountain in the chain, though.
I understand that, but that's easy. You look out and you're like, dibs.
Maybe Mrs. Lovell was hot. I don't know. I didn't
think
look her
Mrs.
up.
Lovell was hot. The actress that plays her in the movie, very hot.
Yeah, this guy got so close that he got to circumnavigate the moon, and now he gets his shot.
Yep.
This is his ride off into the sunset, and he's going to be stepping foot on
It's
the
also
moon.
his fourth mission, man. At that point, these guys are insanely smart. They know the capabilities. There's nothing after the moon at this point.
No.
It's not like, hey, I'm going to stay in the program long enough to see the next, celestial body reach. No, like this was the pinnacle, and he was going to end up going out on top.
It is a fuzz ironic that had Lovell landed on the moon, we would have known him in the same capacity that we knew Conrad and Beam.
Yeah.
And now everybody knows him. He's a very famous astronaut, not because he walked on the moon, because
he walked away.
Yep. After Armstrong and Aldrin, anybody that walked on the moon, you just didn't know their name. Lovell's name is known because he didn't get to walk on the moon.
Yeah. And I didn't even walk away like he walked away from the mission or the program. You'll find out.
Yeah.
So the launch is scheduled for April 11th, 1970. It would go and land on the moon. I believe it was going to be on April 13th, right?
I think it might have been 3 days.
Okay. So
just to we got to lay out the ground, guys.
oh, that's all right. That's right. Sorry.
You're going to have a lead flight director. There were 4 of them. Gene Kranz was the head of the white team. Tremendous smoker. Glenn Looney was the head of the black team. Jerry Griffin was the head of the gold team. You had Milton Windler, who's kind of a quiet man in the back that ran the maroon team. The maroon team apparently wasn't the A team. Capcom.
They're all A teams, man. Like it sounds so bad to say that.
The A4
but
team,
I mean,
instead of maybe they were the emergency team and they just
they were the 4th smartest team in the world at this.
You had your Capcoms, which were the only people that were allowed to speak up while they were in space to the astronauts. So these guys were the loudest voice in the room. They weren't the decision makers, though. They were the loudest voice in the room.
They were the only voice allowed to talk. They relayed the information as it was given, but they were also, these were guys that had aspirations or were already training to be astronauts. So the people they have in these positions doesn't necessarily mean like with the flight controllers. Flight controllers are all the guys when you see like the mission room, all the guys in front of those monitors. Those are not the only guys working on the mission. Those guys are the guys that represent entire teams. They are just the mouthpiece and the person looking at their screen. Behind each of those guys in the back rooms, you have entire teams that are running tests, monitoring all these things, and then providing them information and what's going on with it. They're not making the determination just looking at the screen. The team is feeding them information.
Yeah, they're the mouthpiece.
So the Capcom, being the only one that can speak, is usually somebody that's well-versed in kind of the stuff around them, doesn't have expertise, but is also someone that can convey that information really well and knows essentially how to communicate as an astronaut would want to be communicated with.
A lot of them are astronauts that are in the program, just not on
currently working, not on call.
So you had Kerwin, Brand, Lozma, Young, and Mattingly. Dun dun dun. Mattingly didn't ever get the measles.
Correct. Mattingly also was not scheduled to be a Capcom on this mission.
No, he was an emotional support Capcom. So we're going to have another, just like the first 2, Saturn V rocket propelled. It's going to be launched from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The Apollo 11 launch saw 2 million people show up to watch the launch. The Apollo 13 launch had 200,000 people show up to watch the launch. 10% of the amount of people showed up to watch Apollo 13 as opposed to 2 previous missions less than a year ago for Apollo 11.
I feel like I do have to mention this about Gene Kranz. So,
so
Gene's in the movie, essentially, Gene is kind of an amalgamation because you really just see him on screen of all of these guys together.
In the movie.
In the movie. The stuff about the vest, if you've seen the movie or like my friend here to my side, we'll be watching it this weekend. The vest shit is real. His wife would make him specific vests because he always led the white team, so they always be white vests. And it looks fucking sharp. But yeah.
She built him a jersey.
Yes, basically. Oh, and also, wasn't Gene the flight controller on duty when the Apollo 11 landed on the moon?
I believe so. His name rang a lot of bells when I heard it. Yeah. And so he was definitely tied into Apollo 11. the training that these astronauts went through, just specifically for this mission, 1,000 hours of training for astronauts. That's 5 hours for every hour of the mission's plans.
Mm-hmm.
So for every hour that they were going to be in space, they've done 5 hours of training. It's an incredible amount of training to do. That's how good they were at what they were doing, that they spent 5 hours for every hour that they were going to be. That could be sleep. That could be anything.
That's astronaut training.
Yeah.
That's not technically, that's how to operate what they are actually going to be doing. That's not classroom work about physics and celestial navigation and lunar geology and stuff that they're trying to figure out.
Pretty big. This was supposed to be a 10-day duration. The planned landing on the moon was going to be at a place called Fra Mauro, which is a region of the moon that was near a crater. The idea to go to a crater or a mountainous area is the chance to study the impact materials for what was hitting the moon and causing these craters, to be able to look at it and say, okay, what was this space rock that made such a dent inside of the, or on the moon? Mm-hmm. How fast could it have been going?
What's its makeup? Like, why is it just a crater here? Like, is there anything in there remaining from it?
Well, a crater is going to give you the opportunity to maybe find older rocks, to find stuff that was further below the surface than the Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 missions. So you're going to be able to find some different stuff up in the mountains that you would in a flat area. Planned launch was supposed to happen at 2:13 Eastern time.
Really leaning into this 13 thing.
Yep, which would be the Apollo 13 mission taking off at 13:13 military time. It ends up taking off first stage without a hitch. Everything goes well. That part of the rocket ends up peeling off. You go into the second stage. Second stage had something pretty serious. They were called pogo oscillations. And basically what it was the thruster would kick on from the engine. That specific engine would start making a pogo motion, bouncing up and down. And there's fail-safes that was immediately shut off. And they were still able to get a good clean burn on this.
Well, the reason that they're able to even have that movement, because you're thinking about a rocket, and normally the thrust cone, whatever that is, that normally you would think, oh, that's a fixed thing.
Yeah.
Like it's just aimed down, so it goes up. If you look at the Saturn V, it looks like a rocket in the sense of like, where's like the flight controls? Like it doesn't have, like, it's not like the space shuttle where it almost looks like a plane. So you're like, I guess that's believable that could make directional changes in the wind.
Yeah.
With the Saturn V, all of these rockets were on gimbals independently, and they could all shift and move in order to make those micro corrections in order to keep the tip of the rocket pointed straight up. So because it has that movement, sometimes they would do the bouncing motion that you were talking about, and that was either going to cause stuff to start shaking apart or, the cutout of other engines or something.
We're not in orbit yet, folks.
Yeah.
We're still trying to get up to orbit. They said upon further investigation after that it was one cycle away from a catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
So had that done one more cycle, it just would turn into a bomb.
There's plans for that stuff. It's not like, oh my God, everything. There's an abort switch that will launch the actual capsule off the front of it and deploy its chutes and everything so the astronauts come back down.
Still a lot of issues are going to come into play if that happens.
So I was going to say, I think it was the number 5 rocket.
The one in the center, I believe, right?
Yeah, it was the center rocket. That one went out, and and it makes perfect sense. You're like, oh no, they lost the thrust of a rocket. Yeah, they lost it, but he's like, oh, we'll just divert the fuel to the other 4 rockets and burn them a little bit longer. We can't lose another one, because there was some question. He's like, are we having to abort this? They're like, checking with his team. It's that guy that's specialized in that specific thing. He turns around, he's like, no, we're good. So fucking calm. All of them are this entire time.
Yeah. That's one thing about listening to Mission Command and listening to the Capcoms. There's very little change in the pitch, the speed in which they talk.
And you're like, oh, well, how, it did it just cut out for a little bit, or like, did it already use? It cut out 2 minutes early. This thing burns and send them. A launch takes a lot longer than I think people realize. Because just this section, they're like, no, this one had already separated from the main. Mm-hmm. This was the second stage, and it had stopped 2 minutes early. But all these things we're going to find out there's a lot of redundancies and a lot of workarounds for stuff. So they were like, oh, yeah, we've planned for all these scenarios. It can make it.
Oh, well, there just has to be. That's the only way that you could ever talk somebody into doing this, is being like, if this goes wrong, there's 50 other things that we can do. Like you say, there's these redundancies to be like, all right, I'm safe.
Yep.
Like, you have to be able to believe that to want to send human beings up into space.
Okay. So once they reach orbit, they do the circle around the globe to build up speed, because they're going to go and use the Earth's gravity as well for like a slingshot maneuver. I'm fuzzy on the process and the timing for this. While they're in orbit around Earth, is that when they do the maneuver of pulling out the LEM and getting connected?
It would have to be, because, you're moving at such a high rate of speed. I don't know if you could. I feel like you have to get up into orbit to where you could pause.
So
I didn't even know that before you said it. I thought that they.
I think they do it after. I think they do it after they circle, and then launch out and get on their path, because then they could essentially. We talked about this before the episode. The concept of travel in space, when you really think about it, is insane, just due to the fact that something can get a fraction of momentum, but there is nothing to stop that fraction or reduce that fraction until it reaches something solid or like gravity or something like that. So I believe they actually take off toward the moon, and then during that process, I don't know if they slow themselves. They would have to slow themselves a little bit, but they then do the maneuver where the command service module separates from that booster rocket, turns around, pulls the LEM out of it, then they turn back around, and that's when they fire that rocket to continue along to the moon.
To get the connection.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be a 3-day trip that was planned to the moon. At 30 hours and 40 minutes into the flight, there was a camera live feed with the Houston Space Center.
I don't know if this will blow your mind because of all the crazy things we're going to talk about, but the third stage rocket that they detached from when they were turning around the command service module to connect, the ground controllers fired that at the moon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It hit 3 days later, and they aimed it and landed it close enough to the Apollo 12 landing site and the seismometers that they could detect when it hit.
We'll talk about when that comes back up again, because I'm sure that the rest of the astronauts were so pissed off when they found out about it. Like, because Capcom tells them eventually that it was successful.
Yeah.
And their mission is already so fucked at that point that they're like, cool, whatever.
At the same time, when does that occur? Because like they're so concerned about anything that could touch it or cause what happens? Like they separate, they turn around to get the LEM. There's that whole process. And they're like, while you guys are busy hooking up the LEM and getting it like connected, making sure, everything's good, we're going to just fire. Are you sitting there watching this other rocket start to move, and then all of a sudden it just starts to take off toward the moon?
Somehow in 1970, we had the technology to be able to have a computer-guided rocket.
Yeah.
that we're launching at the moon.
And hitting close enough to the last landing site that it's detectable.
Insane. We get to 30 hours and 40 minutes into the flight. There's a live feed at the Houston Space Center. They're conducting this burn to place Apollo 13 into what's called a hybrid trajectory. Basically, the hybrid trajectory was to launch that. You have a hybrid trajectory, and then you have a free return trajectory.
Yeah, it's for like aborted missions.
The free return is technically what they used the first 2 times because they were trying to land in the center of the moon. Okay. The hybrid trajectory was to take them further north so they could get to where their landing area was. That's right. So these course corrections that are going on, everything is going on just fine. It's going on without a hitch. The live feed from Houston cuts off.
Did you remember the Swigert thing? Where during the live feed, he's like, I forgot to file my taxes.
Was that during this one, or was it during the actual one with the friends and the family?
So that's what's maddening. It wasn't just supposed to be a friends and family one.
Yeah.
It was the national broadcast that would be picked up by news networks. None of them picked it up. So the only place that the families could come in and watch it instead of at home on their TVs was coming into the Space Center to watch like the feed directly.
That's the second one that we'll get to. But yeah, it probably was during the first one, because I want to say it was right after it happened. Swigert ends up having this thought of, he had the did I close my garage door thought in his mind. We're talking about April 11th. This was probably into April 12th. Swigert hits up Capcom and he's like, guys, I didn't file my federal tax returns.
I'm getting confused. He called in and did that. The broadcast during the movie, the broadcast has him do that during the broadcast for like the
for the
dramatic,
fans and
for the effect.
okay.
But yes, you are correct. There was the video, and then there was just him radioing back. Remember, there was that thing about Haise when, because this is his first time up.
Yep.
He is talking back to Mission Control and talking back to the Capcom, and he's like, "It's so crazy. Like I can see the rotation of the Earth. I'm watching the rotation. I'm not standing on it." He's like, I think I'm looking at the Pacific Ocean right now. Oh, hold on. Yeah, it's rotating because here comes some land. He's like, that must be Australia. And he's like, it's crazy. He's like, and the guy's just kind of giving him shit. He's like, yeah. No one's probably figured that out before. We should call that the Haise effect.
Humor was a massive part of this, and I feel like it kind of had to be, because once things start going wrong, you have to laugh or else you're going to cry the entire time. It's already so
stressful enough as it is. Any brevity that you can get while still maintaining like the seriousness of the mission would probably be really welcome, especially to the astronauts.
Had to have been.
Okay, so they settle in for the trip.
Yep.
And head off, get their trajectory lined up and everything, and make a thruster burn for the moon. They got the LEM and everything attached. 6 minutes. Are we?
So right before that,
okay,
56 hours into the mission, they end up doing this TV broadcast we were just talking about for friends and family at the Houston Space Center. Lovell has no idea that it's just them. He thinks that he's talking to millions of people on Earth, and he's going through and he's explaining all of these different things on the ship and how they all work.
Takes him on an MTV Cribs-esque tour.
Pretty much.
Of the LEM, shows him everything.
All of a sudden, while he's talking to the camera that I believe Swigert must have been holding, there's this loud pop. And it was actually Haise in the background that had opened up one of the...
It's something like a vent.
Yeah, it was like a
something
valve.
Like a valve to relieve pressure, something like that.
Scares the hell out of Lovell. You can immediately tell that Lovell's pretty pissed about just getting big leagued on national TV.
And then it's basically just like, that's Haise.
Yep.
He's always getting us with that one. Like, are you fucking kidding me, man?
Uh-huh. You're making me look like a dick in front of everybody that's watching at home.
Like, I know that sounds normal after I have a second, but there's a miniature heart attack every time I hear that.
Yeah. So we're laying the groundwork with Haise, the prankster on the ship. They end up getting all that stuff done. Part of this live feed is, Swigert actually goes into the lunar module and shows them like the power up and how all that stuff works. Again, he's showing his family and everybody else's family, and that's it. He ends up shutting all that down. They end up cutting the feed. Good night. We love you. We'll be home soon. Don't worry about us. Cut the feed. 6 minutes later.
6 minutes after the sign-off, flight controller Cy Liebergott is sitting there, and we're going to get back into kind of the technical aspects of it. The workings of the command service module. How this thing generates power is it combines oxygen and hydrogen in order to make both water for drinking, for cooling, but also this is how they generate power with the chemical reaction for it.
Water becomes the byproduct.
Yep.
It's the exhaust, basically.
So this is stored in 2 sets of containers. 2 of the containers, which are about the size of a bicycle, your standard bicycle wheel, but a sphere made of titanium, correct? Mm-hmm. They hold both the oxygen and the hydrogen. And in order to basically keep these things at a consistency where it's not going to cause issues, because in space it's so cold and this mixture is very, very condensed.
It's liquefied.
It's
liquid oxygen.
Yeah. They have to stir it. It has these fans in there that kind of stir up and mix up the stuff. So when they're going to use the power and everything, it's able to be used. This is kind of, I think, before... It's not like right up at a shift change. So you have these, and the shift changes, we named the 4 teams. There's only 3 shifts. So it's 8-hour shifts. I think one of the teams was a backup team in case something happened.
The Marooners.
Yeah. So they're kind of doing this last, thing before they're supposed to be turning in for the night. I believe the astronauts are supposed to be getting some sleep. And they're like, well, beforehand, we were getting some pressure, like nothing out of the ordinary, but stuff that they can get ahead of and fix. He's like, why don't we go ahead and have you stir the tanks and, just get the pressure back up where it needs to be. And then you guys can go ahead and turn in for the night. So Cy Liebergott is the guy that's in charge of this very specific portion, the energy portion of the actual flight.
The CSM electrical systems is what he's in control
Correct.
of.
I love that everything is so fucking so specific for these
You have
guys.
to have that. You have Jack Lozma that's on Capcom at that point in time. So Liebergott's the one making the decision, then relaying that to Lozma so Lozma can tell the astronauts to turn on the fans to stir the oxygen.
Yep. Turns it on. It's on for about 95 seconds. All of a sudden, shit hits the fan. There is this loud bang. It had to have, just based on what we know happens, it had to have shifted because there is a detonation or explosion of pressure. So it had to shift the ship. And all of a sudden, the control board, which do yourself a favor, if you didn't listen to the Apollo 11 episode, we go into a lot of information on like the control board and everything like that. Go look at the Apollo 13, like command module control board. It is just a computer that is a wall sitting in front of a 3-man bench that they're all just kind of watching. This thing starts lighting up like a Christmas tree. These alarms are going off, and because NASA and flight control is monitoring all of this stuff, which, again, you just mentioned it. How are they getting this information?
I don't know, man.
This is a 200, we didn't mention this is a 250,000 mile journey.
At this point, they were only 200,000 miles away.
Okay.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves yet.
So all of a sudden, Liebergott is like, oh shit, like we just completely, like it's showing empty and we just completely lost pressure on one of the O2 tanks. He's like, that can't be right. Because of course they're prepared for stuff like this, but it had never happened before. And their first, it was such a catastrophic thing to happen that he's like, this has got to be, it's what they called, I think they had a name for it. Was it instrument funnies?
Yeah, instrument funnies, instrument somethings.
When you would get some type of like misreading. So he's sitting there looking at it, and all of a sudden we get the famous, and it's not Houston, we've got a problem. First comes on Swigert, and he's like, Houston, we've had a problem. And then because the Capcom was speaking with Krantz, I think at the time, he's like, go ahead and say that again. And then Lovell comes on this time. He's like, Houston, we've had a problem. And all of a sudden it goes from, okay, these guys are identifying a problem. This problem just came up. We now have the common factor of being like, hey, we can't dismiss this. Krantz goes into like fucking cool hand Luke management mode to start getting everybody focused on this. And what do you want to explain what caused it?
Yeah. Before we even get to that, there was 95 seconds between when the switch was flipped to turn the fans on to the explosion.
Mm-hmm.
So this wasn't like we flipped the switch, the explosion happens.
Yeah.
This is, you have enough time away from it to not even think about that this system's still running.
You flipped it?
Yeah.
It didn't do anything. It did what it was supposed to do. You turn around and start looking at something else.
You get this explosion, this loud boom, this loud pop, and immediately Lovell turns around and looks at Haise like, you motherfucker, you did it to me on TV. You think it's funny to do it now? Like, learn comedic timing a little bit.
Mm-hmm. We're not, cameras aren't on asshole.
He looks at Hayes' face, and it's just blank. It's just pale. And then he looks over at Swigert's face and sees that Swigert's face is the exact same way. He's like, that wasn't a joke, was it? Everybody felt that?
And they're in different parts, too.
Yeah.
So, again, you can access, which it's got to be crazy, the access between, because it's the heat shield, but you can still access through it to get down, because that's how you have to get into the command service module.
Yeah.
So you have, I think it was Lovell and Haise in the command service module, the lower portion, and then it was Swigert doing the checks and everything that they were telling him to do up top.
He was piloting.
So Lovell gets up there as fast as he can. He's looking at trying to figure out what's happening. And during this time, this loud bang, this explosion is causing these power fluctuations. They're losing power in some areas. And, all of a sudden thrusters start firing as well. So these are the little directional control thrusters that they use to make like little adjustments and corrections, not the huge one out the back. Yeah. But it's shaking them all over the place. They're changing course. They're not just going in one direction. They're all just firing at different times. So Lovell gets on the manual controls and is trying to steer this thing that's got the lunar module on the front of it. He has no idea what the fuck just happened. Is basically just trying to have to control a fucking bucking bronco in space.
Without gravity.
Without gravity.
Right after this happens, they realize on the gauges that fuel cell B, there was fuel cell A, fuel cell B, there was 3 of them. There was fuel cell C. Fuel cell B begins producing a hell of a lot less power. And at this point in time, it was established that there was a problem. Capcom didn't really understand the whole boom element of it. They didn't understand the explosion because they were so focused on trying to get these instrumental funnies taken care of and figured out. That they're just like, yeah, we'll get to that in a second. We have some weird instrument things going on.
You guys are still alive right now. We're trying to figure out what's going on with the control panel and what's going on with the ship.
And there was no connection between the explosion that happened that the astronauts are reporting and the funnies that are going on. Swigert ends up calling John Aaron, who's going to play an incredible role, just a brilliant young man. And he's like, hey, you know all this stuff about the power of the ship. This is what your role is. This is what's going on all the instruments. Fuel cell B is losing power. What could be happening? Is this just an instrumental thing? And Aaron goes, it's not an instrumental thing. He
describes
happened.
like the different things he's seeing. He's like fuel cell 1, or not fuel cell 1, tank 1 for the O2. He's like, also the pressure is dropping in this tank, which if something is just sitting and it's pressurized and you're not actively draining the pressure to have it push fuel and push the oxygen through the lines, there's a leak somewhere. And with them only having 2 of these oxygen tanks, one of them, come to find out, was literally blown open.
Yep, completely drained.
The other one is now leaking, and these oxygen tanks are your primary method of making power with the hydrogen. You're now on a very finite amount of time before you're not able to make power with this.
You have to figure something out. There have to be measures taken in place. And Aaron tells him, it's not an instrument issue. Something bad happened. And that's when it kind of clicks and like, well, shit, they were talking about a boom. I wonder if that could be it. Then Lovell gets on with Capcom and he goes, it looks like we are spraying some sort of debris outside of the ship.
It had formed the oxygen into almost little, like they described them as look like popcorn.
Like popcorn crystals.
Yeah. And so because this is what's also insane. They are traveling fast when this happens. Because there's no winds or anything like that, all of the particles are just traveling next to them.
I don't get it, man. I don't understand.
And so it's not like you fucking hawk a loogie out the windshield when the explosion happened and all that liquid oxygen leaked out. It got left behind. It's just hovering
cloud
right next to them.
That's going to come and be a major issue. Because once it comes time for navigation and they're trying to use these celestial points, it's really tough to see stars out in space when there's a bunch of shimmering pieces of oxygen popcorn floating around you.
Lovell notices they're actually venting gas, so he's able to see what's going on with that first tank that's now losing the pressure and also going down in the quantity of the actual oxygen itself.
This whole thing at this point, we're describing what to me would be the most panic-stricken moments of my entire existence. But for mission control, they have the redundancies. They have something in their back pocket. If the command module goes tits up, we can put them in the lunar module as a lifeboat. This is something that we haven't trained necessarily for, but we have found out that it is possible to use the descent.
We're aware that the lunar module can be used. This isn't us just being like, well, can we use it as a lifeboat? It's like, no. We know it can be used. Just because we haven't had to do it doesn't. We'd love to never enact any of these emergency plans, but there are plans in place. So as this is going on, there's a shift change coming up.
Of course, it has to happen right around then, right?
Yeah.
Like so there's no other time. This couldn't happen right at the beginning of a shift.
And there's also dedicated resources that are specific to sections of the mission itself. So it's not to say that there was going to be no oxygen left for them to breathe or for using for power or anything like that. The command module had batteries. It had an oxygen surge tank, which is basically this tank that was supposed to be able to generate like a lot of power, but like over a short period of time. But that was needed for reentry.
Yeah.
In the minds of, the flight controllers, the flight director, and NASA, there was never a contingency for, we need to just use this stuff now and worry about it later. It was, we need to figure out what we need to complete the entire return trip.
We're not going to the moon anymore.
Which means, no, we're not touching the batteries. We're not touching the surge tank, which had already begun to get drawn from and everything at that point. But we need to, at this point, go into crisis mode of management of resources and what we still have available and what needs to stay available for the rest of the mission.
We have to figure out consumables, what we can keep. We have to try to keep these reentry batteries charged, because if we can keep them alive, but we can't get them back to Earth, what's the point of keeping them alive?
And the batteries are meant to deploy the chutes that slow them down so they don't splat into the ocean.
Yeah, these batteries come into effect post-service module. So after they jettison the service module, this is the only power that is running the command module to bring it back to Earth.
Yeah, the little dome thing.
At this point in time, they're looking at it, and Ox Tank 1 is running dry. The only remaining functional fuel cell would shut down, and the CSM would basically be required to run on these reentry batteries. Said they had about 2 hours. Now, this is a redundancy plan, but at the same time, there was no script written up as to how to change over to the lifeboat. So you're going to have to pull all of the coordinates that the command service module has and then take them over into the LEM, power up the LEM, which they said could take hours to do on a normal basis. They end up getting it powered up in like 15 minutes.
This shit is not an airdrop.
Yeah, you don't just put the key in and turn it.
And it doesn't connect with the command service module. They have their own separate computers with differing information because they're meant to be used for different things. The 2 fuel cells, so they have 3 of the fuel cells that are in the command service module that aren't the ones that aren't the batteries. They're the fuel cells.
Yeah.
They're the things where essentially the oxygen and the hydrogen go in to create the power itself. They figure out that they need to, in order to try to kind of stop this siphoning of power and of oxygen. I'm not sure how it's related. I can't explain that. But through the systems, like, we need to shut down 2 of the fuel cells. Okay, well, that shouldn't seem like a big deal. We'll go and shut them down. We'll see if it fixes the problem. And then if not, we'll just go ahead and get the fuel cells fired back up.
Because this still might be an instrumental failure.
Yeah. The thing about that, though, is that these fuel cells did not have that capability. It was a one-shot deal. Once you shut down these fuel cells, they can't be powered on again. So the guy that, is the expert in this, he's got the team behind him. He makes this decision. There's going to be zero blame for any decisions that may not sound correct.
No.
But the decision, it's their best. This is a crisis. All this stuff's going off. They're like, this is what, based on the information that we have studied and designed, this is what we believe, and we're completely confident in it, that it's going to go ahead and stop the drain on this. It doesn't stop. So they've just shut off 2 of the 3 modes of power generation for both the command service module and the command module, and they're down to 1, and it didn't fix the issue. So they're still losing the oxygen, and they're going to be losing the ability to even generate power in this 1 remaining fuel cell.
Well, and that's just it. Even if they could have gotten them fired up again, possibly, it wasn't going to do any good because they didn't have any oxygen left. Their oxygen was depleting. So if you have 2 fuel cells, or if you're able to get 1 back online somehow miraculously, it doesn't matter because you only have a finite amount of oxygen. Mm-hmm. So you're going to burn through it regardless. As Chris said, you can't just upload any sort of documents or any sort of flight plans or anything like that to the ship. You can understand the heart rate of Lovell sitting in his chair in his skin temperature because you have sensors on him. But if you're going to give him any instructions, it has to be verbal, and then he has to write it down word for word. Mm-hmm. Just absolutely incredible that this takes place.
So a lot of... Oh, sorry. You had mentioned the debris causing navigation issues. So with all of this going on, the reason the debris causes these navigation issues, I looked this up and I was like, why would that cause issues? They're in space. With that thing being the only light has to bounce off something for it to actually be light, correct? To actually light up. With that being the only source of light in just this ocean of black, the reflection from the sun, the first thing you're going to see out in front of you and the brightest things you're going to see are going to be those little things floating next to you that are being lit up by the sun or by the reflection of light off what you're currently flying in. So they're trying to look at these stars and can't see to determine these constellations and celestial bodies because the most visible thing in front of them obscuring the way is these little popcorn crystals that probably look like stars themselves to some degree.
Yeah. Is that the North Star, or is that the 8 pieces of debris in front of the North Star floating around? It's looking exactly like it. There's no way to be able to tell.
Well, and like you said, they're now down to this one fuel cell, and because there's still some issues, they're like, we have 2 hours to go and do this. So, like you say, get them to the lifeboat. It's got charged batteries. It's, full O2 tanks and everything. But again, everything is partitioned off for certain parts of the mission. This is not a land on the moon mission anymore. This is we need to just get back to Earth mission now. So all the resources that were going to be used to land on the moon can now be used by these guys. So they have the batteries, they have the O2 tanks, but it's not something where you can just be like, hey, stretch the hose out and refill the other O2 tanks from this. Everything is isolated and you're not doing any type of like swaps of anything in space.
And the LEM is stocked to keep 2 guys alive for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Now the LEM is going to have to keep 3 guys alive for 4 days. So the numbers immediately change. We'll talk about the cold later because very funny how that all comes about and what they do with their suits.
Okay. So the guys on the ground, the flight controllers, determine what needs to be done to preserve enough power that they're able to run crucial, vital systems to get these guys home. Again, they already know what they need. They already know what it's going to require to get them home. They don't know exactly how much they have left or anything, but they just know at this point, shut the command module down. And I think like Swigert, you could hear his voice. He's like, okay, can we restart it? And they're just like, we're going to be working on that because, so I think it's, people think that NASA builds the stuff and then launches it. NASA is the training program. NASA is the launch program. They're the monitoring program. They do all that kind of stuff. Just like in World War II and just like today, these things have building these things are actually outsourced to other companies.
Private contractors.
Yep. So the command service module is designed by North American Aircraft, I think at the time were North American, and the lunar module is designed by Grumman Aircraft.
There's going to be some issues.
They have people from these companies, of course, because they need to have someone that is the representative of their team that has the collective knowledge in case they run into anything. The guy that is there from, North American is like, we know, like, this thing takes, to get this thing powered up normally before launch, people are out here 3 days in advance, powering up systems individually, one at a time, and monitoring their progress as this thing powers up. It is not designed to be shut off in space during a mission, and it's definitely not designed to be, getting restarted. They just asked the guy, it's not designed for, you guys didn't design it for that, but can it be done? And they're just like, we don't know. But at this point, like, you got to worry about that problem later.
It's a problem for another day.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's credit to NASA. This may be what blows me away the most about them. It was always just the problem in front of them. It was never the problem down the road because those problems aren't problems yet. Your problem is to try to keep them alive long enough to get to that problem.
Yeah. But you knew what it required to get them to that problem. It's a weird mix of them looking at the problem in front of them, but then out of the periphery being like, I know that I'm going to need it based on if no other problems happen is kind of what they're playing the game at.
Well, and there's also teams that are looking downfield because that is going to affect
all the guys in the back rooms
that
are already hard at work trying to figure out everything that could possibly be going wrong.
Yep. So just because mission control is talking about the problem at hand or the next problem to face doesn't mean that there's not thousands of guys in the back that are worrying about everything else coming on.
That aren't dissecting every word that's been coming in from the, from the astronauts. So with the command service module, it's not just like, oh, we're going to hit the breaker and turn the thing off. There's a shutdown process that has to be done in a very specific sequence in order to follow, essentially give them the best chance of turning the thing back on. If you're going to have to do this, then you better shut this thing down the right way, but you're going to have to do it pretty fast because you only have 2 hours. So as Swigert is trying to shut this stuff down, they send Haise into the lunar module to go ahead and get it powered up, which powering up the lunar module usually took a couple days. Like as they approached the moon, they would be down there a few days in advance getting the thing powered up.
I thought they said it was 3 hours.
Shit, it might have been 3 hours that they had to reduce down to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was. It was usually 3 hours, but then they had to whittle it down to 15 minutes. So he's down there trying to get that thing fired up so they can use this thing as a lifeboat. And he's got, of course, Capcom's the only one speaking to them. So all of these guys are talking to Capcom, and this guy is having to filter this information in his head, decide what's the most important thing to tell them right now. He's telling Lovell, you got to go to the navigation computer, you got to go to this guidance system, and you got to take down like your guys' position and all this stuff. You're going to need to plug that then into the lunar module's navigation system, so then you guys can maintain positioning and adjustment and where you guys actually are pointed at right now after the thrusters had been going off as well. So he's up there, pencil and paper, taking down all of this information, while at the same time he's having to do this calculation of saying, okay, it's not going to control itself the same as just making adjustments if we were just the command module. I have to try to take into...
We're facing the other direction in the lunar module.
Correct. Yes. He has to try to do math in his head, which I don't even understand what field of math this would be. He's trying to calculate what he needs to make as far as these little modifications based upon the size and direction of what they're going to be facing when they have to continue going. And the fact that they're already letting him know from flight control, hey, because we're shutting this down, there's no access to the booster rocket. The LEM, the rocket on the LEM, which is meant to bring you down to the moon, control you and everything, and then also get you back from the moon back up to the command module, that's going to be your mode of transportation. Now, but you're going to be facing the other direction with the heaviest part of the ship out in front of you that cannot respond. It's dead weight in front of you, and Lovell is just sitting there being like, okay, I got to make this adjustment and this adjustment. And as he's running it down, he's talking to Capcom and basically just saying, here's my calculation. Will you guys check my math?
The most human moment of this whole entire story.
And these guys just go to work on these like slide charts. There's 3 of them that's their department of like the navigation or like the guidance system. They're going through and they're all doing the math, and they're all given, one guy gives his thumbs up, the next guy gives his thumbs up. He's like, yep, that'll work. He has to take that information and then go into the LEM and program all of that information into the LEM's computer. And they're having to do this within this 15-minute window of getting the thing powered up and the LEM or the command module shut down.
We got to talk about Haise here for a second, because you said something that was leading into something that I was thinking about that, it's really hard to fathom unless you really talk it out. So Haise is the LEM control. He's a LEM pilot, right?
Yes.
He controls the LEM system from pulling away from the command service module, floating down to the moon, landing on the moon, coming back up, reconnecting.
Yes.
The whole entire time he was trained to fly the lunar module and the lunar module only.
Mm-hmm.
Now he has to figure out how to run the yoke and the throttle and everything else with a machine in front of him, a weight in front of him that's many times larger and heavier than what the one thing was he was supposed to be able to control.
They can't see in front of them.
Yeah.
Because this thing is very large. There are windows in the LEM, but these windows are in a position where you would need them if you were pointing up sitting on the surface of the moon and you were trying to figure some stuff out. They now have this thing that they're basically flying. It'd be like driving in your car, but the front window is covered and all you can see out are your side windows. You're like, well, I guess you can't see what's in front of you. You're going all off of these instrumentation. You're going off of looking through this guidance telescope or something that's in the LEM, and you're trying to pinpoint constellations that are off to the side of you to determine if you are on the right course or heading the right direction.
Well, a movement in the LEM, you're going to be able to shift and move a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
But now if you have to bring the command service module in the same way, it's going to be a million times tougher. And it's something that you never trained for. You never trained to drive the LEM with the CSM in front of it connected.
Yeah.
So every turn that you take, instead of being able to make, a split-second turn, it's like you're driving a ship.
Yeah.
Everything has to turn in a completely different way. So he's in charge of that, which it blows me away to think that he's just like, okay, I'll fiddle with it a little bit, and that's just going to be the only training that I have to be able to make these course corrections.
Yeah. But also doing the math in his head because he knows it of saying, I know how many pounds per thrust this is. I'm adding in how many, I know how many pounds this loaded command module weighs because this is the information that we have and is going to be important to some degree at the mission. I'm trying to make these pounds of thrust time this additional weight, but it's out off of their center of gravity. Just insane what these guys are coming up with on the fly. Basically, the decision for, hey, how are we going to go and get these guys home is, immediately being discussed in mission control. The two main kind of prevailing arguments are either the direct abort or the slingshot.
The direct abort had to have been pulled off pretty quickly, and I believe that this was kind of their immediate reaction. Swigert looks at this situation. The direct abort would require them to use the command service module's thruster that was down in the service module where the explosion just took place.
And had no idea because it wasn't powered on.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know if they could power back on. And even if they could, what condition would it work? And if they powered it on and it didn't work, they just used up the power and they were done.
Yeah, so you're going to have to turn around, and the direct abort is literally just turning everything around and firing it back towards Earth. So
that's out.
It gets you faster there. You're going to be able to save people.
Not if you don't know if the fucking thruster works.
If it works.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. Is if this all works, that's going to get them home the fastest. Are you willing to take the risk to completely upend any other way to get home for this one direct shot?
They got rid of that so quick.
Yeah.
Like it was instant that was off the table. So it comes to be the slingshot maneuver of continuing on their course toward the moon, slingshotting around the moon. And then once that slingshot occurs, them doing a thruster burn of the LEM's thrusters to then launch them back toward Earth.
Kind of cool to learn that the descent engine on the LEM, the thruster, they had actually known, because I want to say that it was Lovell was the one that tested to see if the descent engine would be able to power the whole entire thing. Like on a previous mission, he had actually tested that theory out.
Oh, Lovell did?
Yeah, so he knew in the back of his mind.
That shows you how just fucking thorough they are.
Yeah.
To be like, hey, while we're up here and we have the ability, I'm going to have you go ahead and steer this thing around with this on it to see if it can actually do it.
Yeah, see what you can do. See what you can take care of. This second idea, this long, what were we calling it?
Slingshot.
Yeah, the free return trajectory.
There you go.
The thing about this is you're going to have to do multiple burns. And a burn is just basically firing up the engines, pushing the thrusters on to an exact percentage of power in the exact direction that you need to go when you, A, have a whole ton of extra ship to push that way, and you have no idea which way you're going because you can't tell from the stars and the celestial bodies around you which way you're going.
And again, NASA is still you're still in constant communication. They can still see you on their guidance systems and everything. Yep. You still have your guidance system that you're using out of the LEM that you're able to do. You're relying on that, and then not really these celestial bodies, like you said, because of all the obstruction. The other thing too is like on the LEM, it's just like it was on the Saturn V, because there's no air up there. So like with a plane, you adjust the flaps and everything. That's what actually controls your direction with an airplane. There's none of that. So all of it's done by these little side thrusters. And then also this larger main thruster would be like on a little bit of a gimbal, like on the Saturn V. So it can make its own adjustments and everything.
Weren't the minor adjustments like the little puffs of air?
That was the ones that would actually like puff out like oxygen to move it to the side.
Yeah, okay.
But then the main thruster would actually be able to swivel and kind of rotate a little bit.
But as far as like making minor corrections before you turn on the thruster, they're just little puffs turning you into that direction to figure it all out.
Just pushing you just a little bit in the opposite direction.
This free return trajectory would require them to do these multiple burns. It would take longer because they were going to get back on this free return trajectory that they had pushed off to go up to where they were going to land. Once they're on there, they're going to circle the moon. They're going to use the moon's gravitational pull essentially to slingshot Apollo 13 around the moon and give them enough inertia, basically, to continue this push. There were different ways that they could have gone about this just to try to gain speed. They decided against one big long burn because they knew towards the end of the mission, if this one big long burn burned up all of their fuel, that they wouldn't have a chance to make any course corrections.
They had to basically utilize, the reason they're utilizing the slingshot is because they wouldn't have to use fuel. It would provide that type of speed. They would just then use the burn in order to, it's not perfect to say like, hey, we're going to get out of the gravitational pull of the moon at exactly the trajectory aiming at Earth.
Yeah.
It would be, we're going to create this burn as we're coming out of it and then use that burn to propel us, but at the same time in the exact right direction.
And leave us enough to make some turns.
Because we don't know if we're pointing exactly in the right direction or if we're going to need to.
Now, this all sounds fairly easy. I mean, they have all this stuff, all these fail-safes. All of this new mission that they were planning, all of the software for Mission Control's computers had to be written on the fly while this was going on. It wasn't like they could just pull up a different screen. I forgot who I was listening to in the interview. I don't know if it was Slayton or one of the other guys that was there. But when you look at Mission Control in like Apollo 13, I saw part of that during the launch sequence that you told me to watch.
Yeah.
There are handles on each side of the screen, and they're basically like panic handles. It's like they're comfort handles.
Yeah.
And they said that usually if you have a guy that's holding on to one of them, he's probably in some sort of like stressful position trying to figure something out.
He's got his team talking to him and he's probably like, shit.
If you see a guy standing or sitting at his desk and he's holding on to both of them and staring at his screen, you know something's gone very, very wrong with whatever he was doing. So they said that intermittently, as you would look across, the other guy that, we'll get to that in a second, but as you would look across, occasionally you would just see these guys grabbing onto both of their panic handles, and you knew that that was an area that you would have to like go over and talk to and figure out what was going on.
Also, this is being during the 70s. Everyone fucking smoked. I think they said like 90% of people smoked. And there is indoor smoking in Mission Control. I actually tried to look up how many cigarettes were smoked. Unfortunately, there's no record of it. But you can imagine the amount of cigarettes and coffee that were going around there. One thing that Krantz does pretty early on is he's not pulling people that are on the flight controllers, but he's going around to all of these other people from the teams, all of these other experts, and he's getting them together and he pulls them into a room. They become what's known as Tiger Team, fucking badass, but they're basically this group of specialist experts led by Gene Krantz, and they're presenting him, you got the guys in Mission Control, the flight controllers that are monitoring the situation. Their teams are still talking to make these, on the fly adjustments that need to be done.
Did he yell Tiger Team assemble, you think?
I fucking hope so. Tiger Team is this group of people that are planning for what's going to be necessary to get them home. They're looking at the entire picture and saying, what is required here? This is where we kind of get the introduction of, is his last name Aaron or his first name Aaron?
Last name. John Aaron.
John Aaron?
Yeah.
So John Aaron is a specialist in the power system, the battery and power system, correct? And basically tells Gene, like, listen, we've done the calculations. This is our area. We need to get this thing down to a very, very low amount of amperage in order to have enough, based on what we know right now, to even support critical systems that give these guys a chance of getting home. That's not to say any other systems. That's what we've determined, the systems of the bare minimum to get these guys home alive. Not comfortable, not necessarily in great shape, but to get them home still breathing. And I think what they wanted to bring it down from was 60 down to 12.
How much, just to give people a reference, 12 amps is the amount of power needed to, what is it? It's power 2 car headlights.
To run a set of headlights.
Or what is it? A quarter of the power to run a microwave?
Yeah. So the power levels, I think, coming out when they, came out of the slingshot and they were able to reestablish communication, they saw that the levels of, were at, the quarter of about what a microwave uses. And
nothing.
And at that point, anybody, I think they called it like power brokering.
Yep.
Basically, where you had all of these guys from all these other systems, guidance, navigation, the life support, all this coming to this guy that Gene Kranz, as soon as he tells him you need to shut down, down to this amperage, is just basically like, you're the guy that's the expert on this. Yeah, we're doing that. And then we'll figure out later how he's actually going to be in charge, and he's going to partition out whatever power, and he's going to determine what systems are going to go ahead and be needed to complete this mission.
Also, the insane thing about this is I think they said the average age in mission control is about 28.
27 years old.
27?
27. And that means that, there are some people, which you got to imagine, you got guys like Gene Kranz, other people in senior positions, the guy at Capcom, being like an astronaut, probably a little bit older. There are people younger than 27 that help make that average. There are 23-year-olds, there are 24-year-olds as flight controllers that are just fucking geniuses.
Not real world experience, but enough experience and training to be able to do all of this stuff.
So, go ahead.
You got anything for the first burn?
No, but let's take a bathroom break.
Go ahead.
Oh my God, Adam. What is that up in the sky? It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's socials. Oh my God. It's faster than Instagram.
That's historically high pod on Instagram.
More powerful than X?
It's historically high, historically HI on X.
Able to leap tall threads in a single bound.
Back to historically high pod on Threads.
And, I guess there's still Gmail, right?
We got that too. That is historically high podcast at gmail.com.
All right, guys, back to the show. All right. Oh, also, Tiger Team, Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I believe they said it was Nixon came back, or after everything goes well, to put a spoiler on it, everybody comes back. But Nixon came through the Houston Space Center and wanted to award, I believe it was like everybody, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And they just said, give it to the top guys.
I want all you boys to have it.
Everybody gets to share one.
Yeah. So they're slingshotting around the moon, just like on a normal mission where something before it?
Yep. 61 hours in, 29 minutes, there was this first burn that was going to take place. This first burn was going to last 34 seconds, and it was going to put Apollo 13 back on this free return trajectory away from this original trajectory to get to their spot around the moon. That change would put the mission on the return course to Earth in about 4 days. So I believe they said it was like 36 hours to go with the direct abort to get them back. Now we're talking about a matter of 4 days. At the same time, as they're moving around for 4 days, you have to try to look at where the return is going to be in 4 days.
The return is determined. That spot, and I don't mean determined as in like the return is always going to be near Cape, Canaveral in Florida or anything. The return is going to be, as far as in terms of like spatial awareness, I guess. If you were to take a globe and you hold your finger and hold it in the same spot, but lift it off the globe just barely, then spin the globe. At any time that thing comes down, that's where it's coming down, is where what's under your finger at that time.
Yep.
So depending on when it wasn't like they were like, oh, we're going to adjust course and then get to Florida, wherever you are. There was a specific way you had to hit the atmosphere at a certain point on the earth in which it would then pull you in, but you wouldn't be in too shallow or too deep. Too shallow, you bounce off like a fucking rock on a pond. Too deep, and you build up too much heat and you build up. So everything was triangulated for this landing spot, regardless of what happened to be under it at the time.
Well, the only way you could change that would be change the time of return.
Yep.
They kind of look at this as, okay, 4 days, we got to have another choice here, because that 4 days would end up putting them into either the Atlantic Ocean or the Indian Ocean. I don't know how that works because there's a whole large landmass. Maybe it was just a matter of hours or something.
I think mostly they focused and said it was mostly the Indian Ocean.
Okay.
And the reason they really wanted to avoid that is because there wasn't a huge presence like there would be where you could get an aircraft carrier out there, like they would do recovery and everything. And it would be really difficult. They'd have to almost rely on like a merchant ship to be able to try to track these guys down or to go pick them up.
We've also talked about the Indian Ocean enough to know that it's probably the harshest body of water that they could land in.
Yeah, exactly.
The Indian Ocean is dangerous as shit.
Shit's already going to be difficult for these guys, and they need to get to them as quickly as possible in case any of them are in bad shape or anything like that. Yeah. So, yeah, being able to get to them quickly was huge. So this allowed them to be able to splash down in, I believe it was the South Pacific.
Option one would be to shave off 36 hours in this return time, and it would require jettisoning the service module. The issue with that, though, is when you jettison the service module, then you expose the command module's heat shield. And you're exposing the heat shield in a area where you get rapid temperature changes down to basically however cold space is against something that was designed to reflect heat and to burn up in heat.
It's down there protected by the service module against debris hitting it, against, like you said, it's sealed.
Yeah.
It's not like it's just resting and it's held in by some fucking ratchet straps. It's sealed to protect it until the absolute moment they need it to make sure it is pristine and exactly like it left the factory floor and was assembled.
Yeah, you have to have that. And if you give it this extreme temperature change into this ice cold, colder than ice. I forgot how cold we decided space was, but whatever that is, it's not good for the heat shield.
Yeah. And the risk, because it's forward facing, of them even going into something. Have you seen the piece of block of aluminum that was struck by?
Yeah, you showed it to me during
and
Apollo
it looks
11.
like it was the fucking T-1000 on Terminator just splattered. All a tiny little thing has to do is hit that heat shield, punch a hole in it, and you're burning up on reentry.
You're hosed. Also, this.
Sorry.
Yeah. So this full burn that they would have to do to get them back 36 hours earlier, as we talked about earlier, it would deplete all of the remaining fuel, meaning that no other course corrections would be able to happen because you wouldn't have any fuel to use the descent burner to get them in.
You're aiming from a long way away at that point.
Yeah, you're shooting from what we're going to call the PC +2, which it's too risky.
You're shooting from 250,000 miles away.
Mm-hmm. Option 2 would save 12 hours. 36 hours, 24-hour rotation around. 12 hours is going to put you in the exact same spot. And you would land the Apollo mission into the Pacific, just like they were aiming with the 36 hours. It was just going to be a day later. This was called the PC +2 burn. And basically what this is, it's called the Pericynthean, which was the course that would take them closest approach to the moon.
Yeah.
2 hours after that would be when this first burn would happen.
Yeah, so the way it was explained, that's, I guess, the simplest for me to understand. When you're entering the orbit going around the moon, it's not a perfect, like, you know, if you're looking at you're drawing a picture, it's not like you draw a circle and then you go to arc around one side of the circle and you're staying 2 inches away from it the entire time. You're like, oh, that's the slingshot to get around. It's more of it dives in. So as you increase speed, you get closer to the surface of the moon. The reason you do that is because with gaining speed, you need to have a little bit more of the moon's gravitational pull, keeping it tight to the planet. It's like a fucking F1 car going around a turn. Yeah. You stay tight into the turn, and then you start to come out of the turn a little bit wider. And this PC+2 burn was going to take place after they had broken the gravity and were being slingshotted around the moon. That burn was basically going to be like, okay, now we got the speed. Now we need to go ahead and speed up a little bit more, but in the right direction.
Also, wildly cool about Apollo 13. I don't know if it still stands today, but at the time this was true. Apollo 13 was the furthest craft traveled past the moon of any craft because, as you're saying, if you can go out far enough and then you can come back in, you get so much more of that gravitational pull. So they were actually further than any ship or anything had been past the moon before they were going to come in and get close to the moon. So they were trying to maximize the slingshot to the point where they're like, we've never gone out this far. Congratulations. You guys didn't get to land on the moon, but you are the furthest people to travel into space.
I'm thinking now of like one of those slalom water skiers.
Yeah.
On the single ski when they go into that turn and how fast they come whipping out of it.
It's just, that's their plan. So this PC+2 burn would take place 2 hours after they hit this pericynthion, which was the closest approach to the moon. The burn would take 4 minutes and 23 seconds. We're talking about down to the second. Some of these will get down to the half second. We
can't forget to mention that while they were slinging around the moon, this isn't them like, this is just them still riding in the LEM. And because this was going to be the closest that Swigert and Haise were going to get to the moon on this mission, Lovell was like, okay, you guys take a look, man. Like, this is the close, like, look how close we are to it. You can actually, see down there. And they had like
Maryland's
the cameras.
Peak.
Yeah, exactly. And they had the cameras out and everything. And at one point he kind of had to be a little direct with them because they were kind of spacing out a little bit too much on it and kind of losing focus, and had to be like, okay, all right, guys, I think it's time we go ahead and put the cameras away and kind of focus on what we're doing here.
Mentally, I think you heard this interview too. It's so different than anything else because when a tragedy happens, when a crash happens on Earth, it's over.
Yeah.
An airplane going down, you might have 2-3 minutes, whatever it takes you to get to where you're going down to that, to hitting the Earth. In this scenario, there is so much reflection time going on in between doing these things to where you're just trapped in your own mind thinking, fuck, I could die. This could all go wrong.
The thing that we're with, it doesn't even have power. And we need that thing to be able to land back on the planet. We don't even know if we can power back up yet. To have to be able to compartmentalize that and try to control yourself because the other guys are thinking the exact same thing, but you're all like, none of us can think that right now because we need all of us at the top of our game.
Not to mention, you're trying to unpack that you survived in a craft that exploded in space.
Yeah. Something that's never happened before, and you have no idea what it's caused, to try to get home.
How lucky do you feel at that point in time that you survived a space explosion?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're panicking because you just exploded in space.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, fuck, I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry, that part amazes me that their minds could even live in that area.
Yeah.
Like, just to be able to think of any of that. Pericynthian burn, trajectory. Oh, yeah. And this was going to be to adjust the trajectory to get their reentry angle, which we'll talk about because it is mind-blowing too. In preparation for this burn, the crew was told, this is where it comes in. They're getting ready for this burn, and Capcom comes on and they say, hey, fellas, that S-1VB rocket that we fired towards the moon just made a connection with the moon. So, like, fuck. The rocket landed on the moon and we didn't get to land on the moon.
Yeah.
Not to mention, if they're behind the moon and the rocket hit the moon, they got to be sitting there like, what if you missed? What if you hit it? What if we were coming around the moon and we got hit by our own rocket?
We've literally been keeping you guys going. I think we know what we're doing.
I think the joke was Lovell came on the thing and he's like, yeah, well, at least something went right today.
Yeah. One thing too is with water being a resource here because they have to use it to cool down any of the equipment that they're going to be using. they have to ration their water.
Insane.
They're down to a half a cup of water a day. They were 6 ounces of water that they were able to drink a day. That's
Get out a measuring cup. Get out a measuring cup, put a half a cup of water in there and take a look at it.
and then throughout your day, try to go ahead and just take little steps out of that. And try to be mentally on the top of your game when you're dehydrated. This isn't just for the day. Every day that goes by that these guys are half a cup of water, they're becoming, that's how fucking good they are. Even with that, there has to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's biologically probably not possible to be dehydrated like that and not have and so they're still doing this stuff.
They did get a fuzz lucky because their food resources, obviously you can go a hell of a lot longer with that food than you can water.
Mm-hmm.
Their food resources were 75% freeze dried. What do you usually need to make something out of freeze dry?
Water, and at the same time, usually warmer water to try to make it. So even the times they could use the freeze dried or tried to use some of their ration.
We'll talk about the cold. Yeah.
Cold spaghetti.
But luckily, this was the first space mission that came with basically not MREs, but like packaged food.
Yeah.
So wet packaged food that they could eat. It was like 25% of it. So they said that they could still at least draw a little bit of electrolytes and a little bit of liquid from the wet food that they're eating at the same time.
Bread cubes, cookie cubes, and there was, a few other things. They probably had some like packs of like juice.
Yeah.
Things like that. Or probably you think they had Tang? They fucking had to have had Tang.
Yeah, astronauts love Tang.
Yeah. Them and me both. The slingshot burn, they end up doing it for 34.23 seconds. Again, this is down to the last minuscule amount. This is how much these guys are calculating that these burns this one has to be for.
Yeah, but also to do this burn, all this light that's glinting off this debris makes using the stars impractical. They have to have this navigation lined in, and these navigation purposes are completely fucked with all this glinting stuff around them.
They gotta have a fixed point that's a known point, usually used, you have to use stars.
What's the biggest star that you can use? What's the only star that doesn't look like all the stuff that's glinting around you?
Our sun.
The sun.
Yeah.
And specifically the upper right quadrant of the sun, because again, if you're looking at a star, you're looking at a very finite, far place where you can point it. Sun's big as hell. So you actually had to pick the upper right quadrant of the sun and focus. I believe it was like a visual periscope.
It's the space version of like a sextant.
Okay. They said that the other way that they could do it was if they placed the sun or the Earth, it was directly in like the port window in front of them. If that was directly correct, which you're going to want to point yourself at the Earth if you're trying to burn towards it.
Yeah.
And then you had to use the sun to dial in exactly where you needed to be. Like Chris says, at 79 hours and 27 minutes and 38 seconds, this burn was started. He said that it was almost perfect. They said that throughout this whole entire thing, it was almost perfect. After this burn happens, the crew immediately shuts down anything in the LEM that's not a life-saving system to conserve the consumables.
Bones. And again, this is them still doing this with this giant dead weight out in front of them because they have to have it there. They got to have the rocket that doesn't work anymore and all the supplies that they really can't, they're hoping are still usable. And then they can't get rid of that because it still has some stuff they need, but it would also, it's there to protect the heat shield.
Yeah.
And figuring all this stuff out. But no lights, no navigation computer, no heaters. This thing basically just becomes, I think one description of it was a floating husk in space. It was simply a place to sit and breathe in.
I think they also said the LEM's outer skin was so thin that it could be pierced by a pencil.
There were certain points of it that were that just tin foilish material that, you could, like, it would be 2 layers thick and you could still poke through it with it. And that's not to say like someone drops their pencil and it goes through it. You could take a pencil and jam through it, but still.
That's all that's between you and space.
Yes.
And
you're not in your spacesuit.
Well, and this is where we get into kind of these initial concerns, including the spacesuits. all these consumables were so necessary that they looked at it. Some of these concerns were eased as they realized that the LEM had a considerable amount of oxygen in it because the LEM was supposed to go down to the moon. And when they would dock and get out of the LEM and go walk on the moon, when the doors would open, it would suck all of the oxygen outside of the LEM immediately.
Yeah.
So you would need enough oxygen to be able to prime everything for when you get back in, still wearing your suit, to oxygenate the LEM. I think oxygenate's the right word.
Just like put atmosphere in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you could take your suits off. That's a great thing because they never got to the moon. And since they never got to the moon, they never burnt up all of that oxygen. Plus, you have all of the oxygen that's in the suits that are used for when you're going out onto the moon. Plus, you had, I think it was the whatever amount of days. I think it was like 3 days worth of oxygen for these two guys.
Yeah. So they're covered as far. Here's the thing. They're covered as far as breathing oxygen goes. But what happens when you're breathing?
Gotta exhale.
You gotta exhale. This is where the fine tuning of this starts to kind of work against them. Temperatures at this point are, they said, around the mid 30s. It's like, they said basically it's like sitting in a refrigerator.
They said control module, it was averaging 38 degrees, which I think Celsius for all of the correct worlds or all the correct
which
countries,
is just in the single digits.
It's like 3 degrees Celsius, I think.
Yeah.
For every listener outside of the United States. They said it was 38 degrees in the control module. The LEM, the one that they're all living in, was around 40 degrees.
Yeah.
So you had an issue where as you're breathing out, it's carbon dioxide, but at the same time, you're also breathing out wetness. You're breathing out moisture. I think it was, who was the... Swigert.
Yeah.
Swigert didn't have a spacesuit.
Yeah.
Swigert said that he had to put on all 3 pairs of his underwear just to keep himself like semi-warm.
They're still wearing just like a cotton bodysuit. And they were like, well, why didn't you get into suits? They're like, well, then how are we supposed to move? It's going to take up more space. It's going to take effort to do all this.
Well, and without air pumping through, you begin to sweat because there's no breathability.
Yep.
And then if you ever get your ass out of that suit, you're going to be sweaty in 40-degree weather and freeze that way. So they said that Lovell and Haise were both wearing their space boots to keep their feet warm. Swigert had actually gone over to the command module to try to siphon a little bit of water, whatever was left in there, and he had spilled some on his feet. So being in 40-degree weather, you're not ever going to be able to get your feet dry again. So he just spent the entire... He didn't have space boots. He didn't have anything else to change into. So he just spent the whole time with cold-ass feet, cold, wet feet. And not to mention, the other problem is, eventually, even though all this stuff is shut down, you're breathing out all this moisture. You're seeing the condensation on the windows.
There's no place for it to go.
You're also running the issue of any of that moisture getting underneath the control panel and start short things out. But again, it's got to be a problem for another day because all that shit's off right now.
We just got to hope that it can, that it's kind of water resistant in some way.
Yeah.
The CO2 itself starts to become an issue when there's readings that are coming from the LEM and from the, that are telling them, hey, these are the levels that the CO2 in here is getting up to. They're seeing the things back in Houston. They're like, oh, yeah, this is going to be a problem for us. The LEM and the command service module, for some reason, which is more, probably more logically explained by the fact that they were designed by different companies, do not use the same CO2 filtration systems. They were canisters and they both contained the same thing with, I think was just like, it was lithium pellets or something like that.
Lithium hydroxide, I think is what it was.
And it would absorb the CO2, basically just scrubbing it out of the system. But they were only meant for a finite amount of CO2 before they actually stopped working.
Yeah, it's just like you have dehumidifying pellets. As soon as that pellet has sucked up enough moisture, it's spent. There's no more humidity that it can pull out of the air.
And the LEM itself, this is made for 2 people to go down to spend, a couple days down there. They're only, from a weight perspective, only packing enough filtration for 2 people's amount of carbon dioxide for that 2 days that they were down there.
2 astronauts for 45 hours.
So all of a sudden, the filters in the LEM aren't working anymore. They go to the command service module and pull the filters there, and they're looking at them. You get a square filter coming from the command service module, You have a round filter coming from the LEM. There's no way, because again, there's no power in the command service module to run the fans that draw the air into the filters. That only exists in the LEM, which does not fit. It is literally a square peg in a round hole. And the way they fix this, again, this isn't, I'm not taking it away from the astronauts themselves, because they implement this stuff without diagrams and are able to do it under tremendous pressure. But this goes back to those flight controllers and the backroom teams.
The Tiger team.
And the teams that are supposed to be working on things like the filtration system. Guy comes in with, the backroom team with a box and holding a spacesuit and dumps this all out on a table. And he's like, this is what they have. Figure out how to make this fit into this.
Are you talking more of the Apollo 13 of this?
No, you're saying that they did not bring in?
The way that I heard it told, it wasn't like the scene in Apollo 13 that I heard where they dump everything out. They were so good about keeping what was stocked on the ship that they actually had lists of everything that they had on there that was inside of the LEM and inside of the control module CM?
Yeah, control module. Command module. Okay. Yeah, command module.
Command module. That's the one I was looking for. And they're like, okay, they have this, and this. Everybody go find some in storage. Everybody bring it to the room. Let's all get taking a look at this.
It still gets it on the table.
It does, but just the fact that they had a list of everything to where it's like, if you have an idea and it's not on the list, it's not going to work.
So that just reminded me too, when this all goes down, Mattingly, they go get Mattingly immediately. The reason they're doing this is, like Adam was talking about earlier, they're having to reprogram these systems. They're also having to test their theories from all of these backroom teams. They're like, maybe this will fix the issue. They're not waiting to see if the command service module is going to power on when they get to the point where they actually need to power it on. As soon as they figure out that they have to shut it off, Mattingly is inside the training command service module, and he's like, I only want what they have. If it's dark, I want it to be dark. So, give me a flashlight, whatever flashlight they have on board. I'm going to go in here. I got my headset on. I'm going to go ahead and power this because it worked the same way and everything. It's a computer. We're going to power this thing down and we're going to work to power this thing back up. So he's also doing this. They've got probably members of the backup team as well that are able to trying to go through all of this stuff to figure out a process. So it's not just like, oh, hey, we're getting ready to power it back on. Okay, we'll just take the instructions that you use to, power it down and just reverse them and do it in reverse order. It's not like that. There has to be a specific sequence, and maybe that sequence has to change when it's being powered down in a certain way. So all of this there is just a nonstop hive of activity, not just in Houston for this, but also for all these other, in Northrop Grumman, they're pulling the command service module and they're trying to determine what they can use it for. They're trying to power it back up. At, the
Sims in the training centers had to have been going 24/7.
Yeah, at Grumman Aircraft, they're going over the lunar module and being like, how can we get every bit of power out of this thing that we possibly need? So they end up using, I don't know the exact, combination of materials that they use.
Bullshit. But
they are able to use fucking duct tape. They are able to use pages from the manuals that they have.
The cardboard face of the manual was used basically to make an arc to stop the plastic bag that was wrapped and duct taped around the scrubber from collapsing in itself as the air from a hose off of one of their spacesuits is pushing the air in.
They had to stuff a sock, I think, in a hose to keep it open or to keep it plugged.
It was in the middle of they had to block the scrubber because it was square.
But they're coming up with this stuff in hours in order to save these guys. They end up calling it the mailbox or something like that. But there's actually a picture of it that they have that they had built while they're in space. Probably Haise took it or something. I think it's Swigert and Lovell that are holding it up. But you can see it, and it's basically, you can see the square filter. You see basically they designed this arc or almost like a funnel or something like that to try to get it down. run that through a hose, and then they had to design an adapter on the other side that would then go into the circular hole that would then seal and be able to have the fans draw that air through the scrubber. And as soon as they get this thing plugged in, again, they're doing this all by one guy, Capcom, who has then provided these instructions that this team has written down in meticulous detail in front of him. He's like, I'm going to walk you through it. And he just walks them through it as they're building it. They build it, they turn it on. At Houston, you start to see the CO2 levels like decrease almost immediately.
Well, think about how important it is putting a name to what you just created, because you're going to be talking them through all of the instructions, and you have to have a good enough description that when you say it's going to look like a mailbox, that you have to put that image in their mind to be like, yeah, no, this looks like a mailbox. I think we did this right.
The other insane thing is it's not like, hey, grab the hose off your spacesuit, the one with the red cap on it, and do this. It's grab hose L7, go ahead and remove fitting B, and adapt it this way. It is everything has a name and a designation that isn't just short, that isn't just a name for something. It's a designation. They know exactly what they're talking about.
Well, the measurements that they're using, the first one is like pull out 3 feet worth of a strip of duct tape. In case you don't know, that's about as long as your arm.
Because they don't have a fucking yardstick.
Yeah, that's the measurement technology.
So it's basically instead of 3 feet, it becomes stretch it out as far as you can go. Does that feel like 3 feet?
If your wingspan's 70 inches and the guy that did it 65 inches, you might have a little extra duct tape, but either way, it's still going to work.
Yeah. It was the build for the CO2 filter was led by a guy named Ed Smiley, who figured that out.
Member of the Tiger team. So the Tiger team went from figuring out all this other stuff to, hey, can you figure out how to build a filter?
Yeah.
Make a square filter work in a round hole. Before we go on, we got to talk about your boys. We got to talk about the guys in the trench.
Yes.
The guys in the trench are so important. The trench is the first row in the command center that is right up by Capcom. It's right up by all the big screens.
Well, okay, so how it's laid out, I think. Sorry.
No, you're good.
It's almost kind of in like an amphitheater style.
Yeah, it's like a horseshoe kind of, right?
Yeah, I've seen Control. I'm trying to remember. This one actually was, I think, straight rows. But they all descended down in a tiered system down toward the main screen that would show like the trajectory
it's
and
like a lecture hall
and stuff. Yeah, exactly. The first row down there, closest to essentially the screen in this like walkway area, they called them the trench. And these were the guys that I want to say were basically, if you had to kind of designate them as something, they were the rocket scientists and they were the dudes that determined the course. Navigation of what had to be, where they need to be pointed, how long the burn needed to be in this stuff. But yeah, I mean, these guys, to be able to figure out and determine the speed, the angle, and all of this is just, it's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, all of these burns that are going on are all of the calculations, we're going to put 40% thrust behind this for 16 seconds. And that's going to put you X amount of speed. That's going to put you X amount of angle. This is all leading up to the re-entry angle because there's a finite amount of degrees that you can enter the Earth's atmosphere. And if you're over that and you're coming in too steep, you're going to fall too fast and you're going to burn up alive. But if you're not, or if your angle is too shallow, I didn't realize that this was humanly possible or that this was at all possible. If you're too shallow, the Earth's atmosphere is so strong that the module would just bounce off of the atmosphere
right across
into space, just like a rock on water.
One thing that starts coming into play is the condition of the astronauts too. We're talking about how many hours are we into this since the accident happened?
Our next burn will take place.
It's been days.
Yeah. Like hour 130, 105, somewhere like that.
Since the problem has occurred, sleep has not really been a thing for these guys. They have tried, Lovell and I think Swigert were talking about how they were able to get like little cat naps. Now and then they would try to catch 15, 20 minute little. You're also in 40 degrees. It's not easy to, and any rest you do get probably isn't going to feel very restful. So not only are you dehydrated, you're being sleep deprived at this point as well. And if you're Fred Haise, you haven't really even slept at all since the explosion. And now you're starting to actually develop a bladder infection.
You're the lunar module pilot. You have to be the one commanding everything now. You can't just sit back because what you're piloting is running the show. It is the lifeboat.
And I didn't even realize this, but apparently being in space suppresses your immune system.
Yeah, space does so many weird things to people.
So, like, it makes him susceptible. So now all of a sudden his body's fighting an illness with a compromised immune system, which means it's going to be resulting in more of a fever than it should. Your body's trying to overreact and compensate for this stuff.
He went from UTI to bladder infection to kidney infection in a matter of like 3 days.
Yeah.
Just super accelerated.
Again, dehydration, the risk of mental degrade is a very real thing leading in here, which again is going to be even more important that the guys at flight control are extremely detailed in what they're needing them to do and making it very easy to perform and understand. They determine kind of along this course, they're trying to, I think it's the trench or like, okay, what trajectory are they on? What's the plot that, they're following? They determine that they're off course. They're at 87 miles off course right now. The amount that they need to be down to they're 87 miles from like where they need to be. They need to be within 20 miles. So it ends up being like 67 miles that they need to go ahead and change their course. Again, navigation computer is not really a thing at this point. So they are in the windows of the LEM, there is instrumentation that shows them degrees and things like that. And then also, I believe the telescope that they're using is, it's not a telescope that let me set it up in front of the window and point it up. It's a fixed point that always has the same thing. They determined that if they can actually put within that, basically that reticle, that crosshairs, the area of the Earth right on the line. What do they call it? The termination line.
Terminator line.
The Terminator line where light becomes dark. Just put it on there, and then that's the heading we're going to need you guys to have in order to make reentry even a possibility.
Well, the crazy part is that termination line, because the Earth is round, means that it is I guess concave or convex, depending on if you're talking about light or dark. Mm-hmm. So the 2 points that you're trying to line up in that telescope isn't right in the middle. It's the two like horns of where dark becomes light on each side of the Earth that you have to hit and line up, which in a way I would say almost makes, a straight line would be perfect, but it does kind of make it easy to have those 2 points to plot inside that telescope.
They're able to use that, and they have to use a collection. They can't just be like, oh, we're just going to use the Earth, because that doesn't determine where our position, that's where we're aimed at. But in relation to where our position is, we also have to know that as well to, account for where we're going to make this adjustment. So they have to also use a couple stars that they can see. At one point, I want to say Swigert's looking out to try to, he's like, I'm having trouble seeing I can't see any recognized constellations or stars. He's like, can you give me some other ones? You hear back on, someone hands something to Capcom. He's like, go ahead and look for this one and this one. They should be brighter this time of year. They should be better. Like, they had it down to where they had backup stars for this navigation stuff. So using this and timing the burn by having Swigert count it on Lovell's watch, as he's watching the second hand, they're able to make this other adjustment to get them on the kind of the correct course.
We'll get to those burns because they're kind of, I don't know, it feels like everybody's always happy after these burns happen, and then progressively like, fuck, we got to do another one.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite right, or we're drifting one way or the other.
Or how do we know that that's going to be dead on once they burned and they pointed where they were supposed to, but that doesn't mean they didn't deviate a little bit, because the burn had to stop when it had to stop. Yeah. Maybe they were pointed just a little off kilter when it stopped.
Fractions of degrees.
And because you're going in that direction without resistance, that is your course.
Yeah. John Aaron and these other engineers are tasked because, again, so far, everything that they've done, check. Good, check. Still alive. We've kept them alive this far into the mission.
Yep.
We have to keep looking forward. John Aaron and these engineers are tasked with distributing this energy to all of these different places. He's got to be the damn soup Nazi at this point. Somebody walks up and is kind of explaining something halfway. He's like, no energy for you.
No amps for you.
No amps for you. The other thing that they have to do now that they're finally to this point is they have to start dwindling these resources, because there has to be an attempt to power up the command module after this full shutdown that had never happened before, certainly had never been done in space. One of the big benefits of having Swigert here was just because he was on the B team, the team in waiting, the replacements. Swigert he had extensive training, and he had helped develop a lot of these emergency protocols.
He worked for North American.
Yeah. So
he worked for North American and helped build and construct the command service module before he became an astronaut. So he was always like already an aerospace engineer, basically. And like you just said, he actually had designed a lot of also the computers. So not just structurally, but he had designed and knew a lot about these actual computer systems and kind of what they could do outside of what the instruction manual provided them.
Yeah. And along these lines, you're getting close to the time where you have to start figuring out these plans for reentry. There were other issues that they would kind of have to come to as far as when you're going to have to start jettisoning things or jettisoning your SM, your storage module, and then eventually, you got to get out of the LEM, get back into the CM. You guys have to get home. That's the only way that you get home because that's the only thing that has the heat shield on it, the only thing that's going to be able to survive. So as they're looking at it, this concern for this entry angle is kind of rearing its ugly head because, again, this last burn didn't do it. There would be this short burn to solidify the angle. Again, if you're coming in too steep, you're going to be hosed, you're going to burn up. If you come in too flat, you're going to bounce off. The degrees here were between 5.3 degrees and 7.7 degrees. So you have, 2.4 degree variance that you can be in. And again, depending on where you are on the sliding scale of degrees is where you're going to end up landing in the Pacific Ocean.
Yep. Or burning up or skipping off.
Yeah. The other issue, like we were just talking about, is jettisoning the service module far enough away from re-entry because you have to get it out of the way. It's got to stay up there.
The lunar module.
The service module first.
Oh, that's right.
So the service module has to go first, and you don't know what the condition of the heat shield is after the explosion. So you have to get rid of it first, but you also have to have an adequate amount of time before you jettison the LEM after that.
So before you do that, they start to actually, because they still need whatever fuel cell and everything, because again, once it's jettisoned, it breaks that connection of having that ability to draw from that fuel cell. So
the battery, from the storage.
Correct, and you can't use the batteries,
you're on the batteries
in the command module because you need those to deploy the chutes and everything.
Batteries have been drained, I think they said, by about half.
So they needed to power it up to try to draw whatever they could from the fuel cell, and then also any remaining power, I think, from the LEM.
Yep.
Before they were ready to jettison either of them.
They used this trickle. It was a trickle charging system from the LEM into the control module. So you're actively pulling the life force out of what you're living in there. They said that it took about twice as much power from the LEM to fill up half as much, or to fill up the control module.
Yeah.
So if it took 30 amps or whatever, it took 60 amps away from the lunar module just to fill it up because of the way they were doing it.
So before we get to the power up, we got to talk about what we were kind of discussing during break, which is, or might have been before the episode. If this timing was any different, it would be a much, much different. It had to happen. If it was going to have an accident like it did, it had to happen prior to reaching the moon. Had it reached the moon, or it might have been able to happen. No, it had to happen prior to reaching the moon.
Yep.
Had it happened after, the LEM would have been jettisoned, because normal procedure was for them to just use the command service module. Once the moon landing was done, they would bring up the lunar module, hook it up, unload the samples, the rocks and everything, put the astronauts over there. And then when they were getting ready to make their final slingshot, head back toward Earth, they wouldn't have the lunar module. So had they dumped that and then this happened, there would be no place for them to go and they would have died.
Did you hear about the 100 pounds?
Mm-mm.
So Capcom radios up to the astronauts. He says, hey, we accounted for 100 pounds of moon materials for you guys to be bringing back home. And due to the weight distribution inside the control module as you're coming back, when you come back in the control module, you need 100 pounds of something in the control module to basically be what you were supposed to bring back from the moon.
That way we don't have to, we can go off existing calculations in an already time when we don't need to be doing any more math. We need you to at least meet us and show us what we're working with, not make us change what we're working with and then try to fix that.
So they had to find, and this is the part that blows me away, they had to find 100 pounds of shit in the lunar module to load in the control module in zero gravity. How can you figure out weight in zero gravity?
Okay, well, Capcom, the guys know the exact weight of every component that makes up. They also know every single component that could be removed or accessed by those astronauts. It's insane to the concept of it and what occurs is insane. But I think when they were told what to do, it was as normal as can be. It's like, you're going to go to this control panel. You're going to remove it with these two screws. You're going to go ahead and move that. You're going to go ahead and go over and take this. There's the sample collection box that weighs quite a bit. These are the things that are securing it to the ground. You can go ahead and utilize this and then that. And they're just sitting there with the list in front of them of everything that makes up the lemon is accessible. And they're saying, what's the quickest we can get to 100 pounds for them and the easiest things for them to go ahead and move to get to that point. That's how fucking dialed they had to be. Even it's insane to think about, but for them, it was just like, oh yeah, this is just a math problem to figure out.
How accurate could you be bringing back specimens though? Like with a moon rock, how do you know what it weighs?
I wonder if there was
maybe a moon gravitational to weight ratio.
That's exactly what I was going to say is they had to know the calculation based upon what the gravitational pull was. They're like, here's a scale. It's as simple as it is, but this has been dialed in to show you based upon the gravity there, what the weight of this stuff is and what it will be once you are actually up into space. Here's the other thing too. They're in space. Things are weightless.
Yep.
So like have to be so precise that even in a weightless environment, you need a certain amount of weight in order to control the burst and everything like that, and how the spaceship is going to react to a thrust or a course adjustment. It's again, the fucking brain power. It makes my fucking head hurt.
But could you imagine sitting there doing all these calculations and like fist clenching, trying to figure this shit out? They're like, hey, you got to figure out 100 pounds to bring from the lunar module into the command module. It's like, really?
Yeah.
This is the shit that we're doing? And
you had guys back where they had the test versions, back at the manufacturer, pulling stuff out and putting it on a scale and telling them, being like, we're going to try it. Because again, that's how many people they had trying to work on this.
Anything else? Guys are at like 97 pounds.
Get some of those pee bags. Because as we forgot to mention, after the accident, what they would normally do is when they use the little gravitation, gravity-free friendly pee tube, it would go into a reservoir and they could jettison that out into space. They got so scared of even the slight pressure of that possibly forcing them off course that they just kept storing their pee in bags that were designed for that in case they couldn't do it. But they probably moved some of those bags into the command module as well for some weight.
You think there was a chance that once the aliens come and attack us, like 1% of the reason that they do is going to be because there's just our piss floating around in space?
Space littering?
Yep.
Yeah.
Not to mention, if you're jettisoning off the service modules in space, there's just space trash floating up around.
It's float with you. Yeah.
So an alien sees that and it's going to be like, who is this? And they pull in and they see NASA on the side of it. And it's like the angry neighbor with the dog poop that throws it back over the fence.
You guys are the piss ship. You guys, ships are always floating around with piss all over them.
Every once in a while, there's just a random bag of piss that falls to Earth and it's the aliens returning it back to us.
You got to imagine too, that there probably wasn't much of it.
No.
Because they weren't drinking, hardly anything.
No. And you're not sweating technically, but you're still breathing out moisture. That has to come from somewhere inside your body.
The backup crew in Mattingly this entire time had been running these simulations on how to start this thing up and developing a procedure that they thought was going to go into work. So they write this thing down painstakingly. He's sitting in there doing the procedure again with a flashlight because they're not going to have power until they power this thing up. And they get this procedure developed, they bring it out, and Mattingly goes to hand it to Capcom, and Gene Kranz is like, can I get a copy of that too? So we're following along. And he's like, this is just the one. He's like, calm down.
We got time.
We have time. Go make copies. He goes and makes copies, comes back, has 25 copies, is passing them out. So everybody that can also be looking at this startup who might see a problem that Mattingly and his team and everything didn't, that's someone that could pipe up and be like, hold on a second, have you guys foresaw this happening? It's just a collective effort of everybody working toward that singular goal.
At one point in time, when they bring it back, Lovell is just sitting there chomping at the bit to start this stuff. They go, hold on, we got to go make some copies so everybody gets it. And like 30 seconds later, Lovell goes, really? We're going to have to wait for copies. Just start reading it. By the time you start reading it to me,
we don't have it. It's all being made into copies.
So that plan, the LEM was supposed to be fully powered around hour 133. That was supposed
command module.
The command module. Sorry.
It would take 2 hours to perform the procedure that they developed.
At 105 hours and 18 minutes, the second to last burn was conducted for 14 seconds. It was again to correct this course, to make sure that they hit Earth at this correct entry flight. But again, 14 seconds. Like that's how dialed in. Not 15 seconds, not 10 seconds, not 13 seconds. 14 seconds is going to put you into these safe limits.
What I thought was pretty cool too is because he had developed the procedure and knew it the most, Mattingly actually served as the Capcom for that procedure of going through. And you could hear in his communication when he's talking to Swigert, who, again, Swigert's the command module pilot. That's his specialty. He's going to be the one doing this. You could almost hear it kind of when he first starts giving him instructions, that you can tell the fatigue and the dehydration, everything is kicking in, just because he's giving him instructions and he's like, you got to slow down. I gotta figure this out. Cause he's also writing them down. He's not doing them as he's telling him. He's writing them down so that way he can actually follow them and not have to worry about mishearing something while he's trying to focus on finding a switch or anything like that. So Mattingly, on the mic runs him through that. And how many hours was it, or how far away was it that they, after it powered back on, they were able to do this? It had been successful in the simulations. It was successful when they did it, in the capsule itself. And I'm trying to remember when they actually decided to get rid of the service module.
I gotcha. Final burn to correct the same problem that the second to last burn takes place at 137 hours and 40 minutes. So I believe the last one is at like 105 hours. So basically like an entire next day, 24 hours. Also at the same time, how do you keep any sort of schedule of day and night and day? There's no extra light. I mean, I guess maybe you get a little bit more like when the Earth is between the sun. Maybe
I
that
was
doesn't
thinking
even
maybe
happen.
if they're on that again, because you wouldn't be, well, here, shit, now you got me fucking spiraling on this. Okay. The moon around our planet does not go around the waist of our planet.
No.
It's not just perfectly right around the middle. It's kind of up, I think, off to the side. So when it comes up, which means if you're flying the most direct path you can between the Earth and the moon, you are technically probably a little higher, which means, your day and night cycle, you might get the sun like cresting over and being like blocked out a little bit by the Earth or some
Partially.
shit. But then as you get closer and the Earth is, looming and getting larger, it would probably be then at that point longer when it's dark, because then you're getting closer to it and it takes longer to have to get it. Yeah.
It just all in the positioning.
It's the stuff. Yeah. Ugh.
So 137.40, there was another 21 and a half second burn. Now we're down to the half second because we are getting closer to the Earth. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be getting a lot more exact. This is done right before they jettison the service module. Mm-hmm. So that's out of the way. They're still in space.
They can see it though.
Mm-hmm.
They're traveling so fast. The amount of feet per second that they're traveling, it shouldn't exist, the speed that they're traveling. And when they separate, it's not like they're like, hey, we're going to stop, separate, get a little further away from it, and then just go again. They're doing this at insane speeds, but because it's within a vacuum, everything is moving at the same speed. What's the comparison, man? Is it trying to... there's no resistance. It looks like it performs as if it's standing still, but it's traveling
thousands of miles an hour.
Thousands of miles an hour. They separate from it, and because it doesn't just whoosh or go off to the side, they get to see it close to themselves, and it starts to kind of rotate away until it rotates enough to where they can actually see the side of it. And they can see that the O2 canister, it's blown apart. They can see where the damage has been done to the other one. They can see the damage went all the way down to where the rocket thruster itself actually joined. So that could have very well been damaged, which it's great that they didn't end up using that.
The direct abort would have been completely hosed.
But the other thing is the damage also extended up to where they could tell near where the heat shield was going to be.
Blew an entire panel off the side of this thing.
It also hit a radio antenna, and for a while, right when it happened, they lost them for 1.8 seconds, but then it's automatically switched over to a wideband, and they were able to get them back. They can see where that antenna had gotten blown off. They're looking at this thing, and they got to be imagined how did this thing hold up even?
Yeah, it's at that point in time, seeing the damage done to that service module, it's connecting all of these different questions that you had in your brain. How bad was this? That's what we felt. You're actually getting to see what that initial explosion feeling was that brought you to that point. And if you look at it, the entire panel's blown off. Good part of that panel that connects up to the command module is near near the heat shield.
What's insane is, when that thing rotate around, they're just sitting by the window and they see that damage come in. When you hear them, they're talking to Capcom and they're like, all right, it's coming around. Oh, okay, and what we're seeing is that, and you can tell their voice raises a little bit and they're kind of shocked. But in their heads, and the other guys probably not on the mic, are just thinking to themselves, how the fuck are we alive? And not only did we survive that, but we traveled the other, 350 to 400,000 miles with that thing. Just limping along.
And nothing else happened. At thousands of miles an hour, nothing fell out, nothing continued to peel. The shock had to be amazing. They said that Lovell, at a certain point in time, just stood there with the camera in his hands. He was supposed to be taking all these pictures to bring back to mission control and show them what happened. And he was just so awestruck by the damage that it had done to the side of it that he had forgotten that he had to take pictures. And then as soon as he snapped back into it, it's nuts. To see the picture, look it up. It's incredible. It'll probably end up being one of the pictures on social media.
The tank almost looks like it had a tiny nuclear explosion, like a mushroom cloud, because the metal is just bent out, but then it stuck. As soon as it bent out to release the gas, it just stayed like that. And you see just this hole in it. It's a huge panel, and the CSM is huge.
There also has to be a certain amount of luck, and none of this sounds lucky, but if you really think about it, the major issue in an explosion is the massive release of heat, right?
Mm-hmm. No. I don't think there's heat in space like that.
But the actual initial explosion, the combustion that goes on, creates heat before everything shrapnel
instantly cools as soon as it's exposed to space. Yes.
So that almost maybe deadened the explosion a little bit and minimized the damage because the heat wasn't allowed to travel through more of the service module.
Reach the other parts that could have been outward. Fuck, yeah.
So, there's a chance that it could have been had that explosion happened on Earth, the service module would look far worse, I'm sure.
Yes.
It would have had to have been way worse, but because it was so cold and that heat immediately evaporated in space, maybe it minimized the damage.
It just blew my fucking mind, man. The heat shield. So the heat shield has to withstand about 3,000 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it heats up to. And during this time that they're still in the command module, that's powered up and everything. They're still attached to the LEM, and something unidentified, I didn't find out what it was, I didn't hear what it was, keeps kind of knocking them off course. Not hitting them, but they keep being forced to drift a little bit. And so they're having to still make a little bit, of these little micro adjustments and everything to keep them on course. Eventually, it's down to that hour, multiple hour window where now we need to separate from the LEM and be able to just use what control we have, maybe some thrusters and everything, to then get the command module into position to start their, again, backwards descent.
Just backing up.
That's so they're facing the point of it. It comes in with the heat shield behind. So they're basically just coming down backwards and can look out the windows and can only see basically the fire and the heat trails and everything. They're just falling. It's a trust fall. They're falling back into Earth.
Falling back into Earth, still attached to the thing that's keeping them alive. Like going through and repowering the command module, you're doing that because that's where that's going to be your final vehicle home.
That's your new lifeboat. Yeah.
Pretty much.
They end up, before they separate from the lunar module, they all take some like keepsakes or little things.
Really?
Out of it. Yeah, I think Haise took some like netting or something like that was in it that would like held machinery or held something secure. I want to say that Lovell took the like navigational, like optical viewer thing. I don't know what Swigert took. Swigert probably didn't take anything because he's standing in front of that control panel making sure everything's done and doesn't have time to look down the tunnel and be like, hey, can you grab me something too? But
what would you grab?
I don't know what's in there.
You got duct tape? I mean, no, you need a more personal keepsake, right?
Yeah, you need something because again, this thing, it's not like it's just going to float off into space. They're close enough now where this will enter Earth's orbit, and this thing that you can poke through with a pencil is just going to be completely decimated by the atmosphere.
Maybe they had to put a weight limit on what they took too. Like you could only take something that's under 5 pounds. So you're just radioing back to Capcom. Yep. You're like, hey, how much does this dial weigh? 9 pounds. Fuck, I can't take that.
Yeah.
You got to take a small trinket.
About that.
You also had to bring the scrubbers that you had used in the Lembeck in there too for weight reasons, right?
They may have like factored that in.
Yeah, potentially.
I'm not sure. Yeah. Well, because the scrubbers still worked in there.
Well, but for weight purposes, not even to use them as scrubbers anymore.
You're probably using anything you can, especially if it had a heavier weight to size ratio. They don't have a way to. They need to separate them so they don't end up falling into the same like course and trajectory.
I love this shit. This is so cool.
And so, like, well, we don't have any propulsion or anything like that. We need to create some separation. So, what mission was it that they had first attempted? They had forgot to do something.
I believe it was Apollo 10. They forgot to depressurize the ports between the LEM and the control module or command module.
And with Apollo 10, you're like, well, why did they take a LEM with them that they didn't land on the moon? Remember, there were run-ups. Listen back to the Apollo 11. There were multiple missions that they went with all of the equipment to make sure they can make the trip. They would just dislodge the LEM. Mm-hmm. It would then fall down to the surface of the moon or something like that. And then they would come back just the way they were going to come back during the actual mission where they were going to go to the moon.
They'd short the fuel tank because astronauts can only be so trusted.
We touched on that during the Apollo 11 episode. Yeah, yep. Exactly. Those astronauts forgot to depressurize the tunnel that connected the LEM to the service module. And so when they went to, dislodge it and everything, the air in there almost formed a form of like propulsion. It escaping forced the LEM out away from the service module. Well, they had to also make sure it was thankfully it wasn't enough to damage anything. Yeah. But they had to then, what are they using to detect this pressure between, I mean, you would obviously, I guess you would already have to have something in place because you have to connect to it and then establish a pressure between them.
There'd be a gauge or something.
But to sit there, for there to be a gauge for that.
Yeah.
So they get it up to where they need it to be. They seal themselves in the command module and they disengage the lock between them, and it just and fires the lunar module out away from what they're going to be landing in.
Tricky thing about that, though, that air pressure has to be so exact because if it's not, it could potentially not push the lunar module far enough away. And if it doesn't, when you're coming back down and you make a collision, all the work that you just did to bring these guys home is for naught. If it's too much, though, you might end up pushing the command module off course. So it has to be the exact amount to not move the command module, but to push the lunar module far enough away that they don't reconnect.
Just enough. As they're separating and after, the lunar module has drifted away, I think it was one of the flight controller. It was the Capcom at the time, but he's like, we appreciated Aquarius. Thanks, Aquarius. You saved these guys and everything. I remember it was Ken. Oh, his first name was Ken. I can't remember what his last name. He was one of the Capcom guys, but he was actually a doctor as well.
Ken Mattingly, wasn't he?
No. It was a different guy. Okay. It was one of the other. And they were talking about how, because he's their communication link and he's the one talking them through all this, they were just having, it kind of proved essentially how the mood had to maintain a form of brevity.
It's gallows humor.
Yeah. Has to be. And so he's like, you really got a great bedside humor or bedside manner. And he's like, what? Come again? What was that? And he's like, you have a really good bedside manner. And he's like, I think that's the nicest compliment anybody's ever paid me.
Yeah, I don't know how, like I say, it's either laugh or cry. I mean, there really can be nothing else. I'm sure there were moments of frustration. I'm sure there were moments of anger. I'm sure Haise, at this point in time, with that infection, is just probably doing anything he can to stay alive.
Well, and thankfully, he didn't have to do anything as far as the responsibilities. The lem's gone.
Yeah, his work was done. We already jettisoned what he had to drive.
Yeah, I think they said, so for the positioning in the command module as they were going to be entering the atmosphere, you had Swigert riding center seat, so you had him in the middle because he was going to be, I don't know at what point you can stop making adjustments, but you can make adjustments up to a certain point to where the just natural gravity is going to pull you where it's going to pull you into that corridor. Haise was in like seat 3, and then Lovell was in the other one, helping Swigert and everything, like with all the gauges and kind of keeping them and controlling certain types of like pitch. Fred just gets to enjoy the ride. He said when he was doing it, because he didn't have to pay attention, he was just looking out the window and watching like the streaks of like fire and everything. Every so often, he's like, you would see a particle kind of just like fly up that was like burning hot. Lovell had pretty much, of course, other astronauts, they learned about what the experience was like, but Lovell is sitting there telling them, hey, this is what's going to happen. If this happens, don't worry. It's normal. Don't react to this. At a certain point, we might decelerate a little bit. Once we hit a certain point in the atmosphere, it's not going to slow us down a ton, but you are going to feel a jolt. That's completely normal. And so those little pieces that are flying off, those were things that were meant to essentially absorb heat and then peel off.
So much easier said than done.
Oh, I know. But at that point, again, they don't know if the heat shield,
you don't know if the heat shield's still intact.
They don't have any other option, though. And I guess you just have to have, again, these guys are fucking built different. And of course, you're not going to hear, fuck, as they're going down. They're scared and everything. They're going to compose themselves. But there does become a point where communication gets cut off because the heat being generated around the command module is so intense that radio waves can't penetrate it. Which, how do you...
3,000 degrees, we were just talking about it.
No, I know it is, but the simple concept of just like how simply put it is where they're just like, well, I guess they're both a form of waves.
Yeah.
And when one gets hot enough, it creates a disruption in the air around it, which makes the radio signal not be able to travel through the air as it normally does. So it can't penetrate that to have a usable signal.
We're long-range signal people. We're 250,000 miles away signal. We're not getting through heat wave signal.
So they enter in at the right. They get into the corridor. They enter in, the trench has told them, this is the course you need to take. This is the exact, adjustments that you need to make. This is where we're going to get you guys home. The blackouts that occurred when they were coming through the atmosphere, of course, it had been a regular thing since they'd been bringing astronauts back like this, and they'd gotten so good at it that they knew the exact time, down to the second in which they would lose them, in which they should gain them back.
It was like 4 minutes, wasn't it?
It was like 3, somewhere between 3 and 4. So but they know exactly. It's not like, hey, it's between 3 and 4. Whatever it was, that's what it was. It was somewhere between 3 and 4 minutes.
Well, and all that was dependent on what their reentry angle was. And
Correct.
On those other places or on those other missions, you had the benefit of navigation the entire time to where you could get that pretty much exactly
They
right.
still had that. That was one of the things I think they powered back up in the command module. But you're still...
It was the backup, because the backup drew less power and they were still worried about power.
So it didn't have all the bells and whistles. Plus, you're going off of these guys calculating this again. Not in front of a fucking computer crushing these calculations, but doing this shit with fucking physics, math, and science and figuring this out. And so it all comes down at this point to the heat shield holding up and making sure these guys had plotted a proper trajectory to get through the atmosphere. Should have been 3 minutes. Which in itself, 3 minutes to enter the Earth's atmosphere and get down low enough to where they could then establish radio contact because the heat wasn't so immense, that's a pretty fucking long time.
Well, then what is that? Just, it has to be gravity naturally slowing them down to the point to where they're cooling off.
I mean, they're traveling so fast that the cooling off probably doesn't happen until they're down where, they're not having to fight the atmosphere so much and it's generating all that heat. And then when they've also been slowed by the atmosphere itself,
it'll cool things down. You can get comms back.
Enough just to at least get a signal through. Yeah. So 3 minutes doesn't end. The blackout doesn't end. This is the first time that this has happened to where they're not getting them back when they should have. Minute goes by. Minute 10. Minute 20. Minute 30. Mrs. Lovell is at home watching on the news because, surprise, surprise, as soon as there was a report of this accident happening,
of course,
fucking world was captivated by it, trying to get these guys home. Everyone's watching. This is what it's all been for. She's watching at home. She's got her house packed, families there and everything, hoping that this all works out. Minute 35 goes by. I want to say Gene or whoever, it might have been Krantz. I don't know if Krantz was doing this in the final phase.
I believe he was.
But asked over to the Capcom, he's like, go ahead and try him again. They weren't just like, try him. He's like, go ahead and try to establish contact. And this wasn't just like a signal coming from Houston to connect with them, because that's a long way away, even for just like an instantaneous communication. Yeah. They had a station in Australia called, it was some goofy ass name.
Didgeridoo or...
Yeah. But they also had 4 planes that were flying around the area that were able to pick up and relay communications. So Krantz or whoever was the flight director is like, go ahead and try him again. Just fucking has to be cool and everything about it. And during a response or during a reach out at like a minute 30 seconds, they come back and you hear Swigert say, I think if the guy's name was Ken, he's like, okay, Ken. He's like, you guys hear me? He's like, okay, Ken. And all of a sudden, just they got him.
And it was pandemonium.
There was a collective, just like influx of like inhale in the room. But just because they got them through the atmosphere surviving them, it's not done yet. Those batteries that they had to recharge to get back up to where they would be able to power the chutes deploying still hadn't been tested yet.
Honeysuckle Creek Tracking Station.
Honeysuckle,
thank you.
That's right.
Canberra, Australia. Or Canberra, Australia. I'm sure I butchered that. I hope to hear about that.
Because I remember during the radio communication, they're like, nothing from Honeysuckle or something like that. And so how the chute deployment would work is some panels would actually detach from the top of the cone and 2 drag chutes would basically come up. Those drag chutes would then pull these 3 huge chutes that, if you've ever seen like an image of like a splashdown for a capsule, it's the 3 massive chutes that they pull out. All of a sudden, it's supposed to happen. They're looking up. They can see where it's going to be happening because they're looking through these windows. Drag chutes pop up. The drag chutes pop up, all of a sudden they pull the other chutes up. And as soon as they saw like the other chutes deploy, the trench had been so good about bringing these guys in on the exact point that they needed to. The ship that was scheduled, the aircraft carrier, I believe it was the Iwo Jima, was only 4 miles away, which means that the people on the deck, all the news crews and everything like that had their cameras, this was all on tape because they were so close to the landing spot that they could film the capsule coming down. It was the most pinpoint landing even in this scenario, that NASA had done up to that point.
Well, that's also taking into account that they got the re-entry angle. It was so shallow that's what took so much longer for comms to kick back in.
Mm-hmm.
So they got the re-entry point that wrong that it took that much more time to get comms back, but they were still 4 miles away from where they wanted them to hit. Like, even though they were wrong, their calculations were still right enough that they would drop right
I wonder
in that
if
area.
it was something they factored in then.
Possibly.
Like, because of this, we have to go a little bit shallower.
I don't know.
For them to hit that, because they parked the Iwo Jima where they thought that the landing was going to be.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's only 4 miles, when you're coming down from the fucking atmosphere and it takes you just the 3 minutes to get out of the blackout, that's not the whole descent. And where the chute is going to then bring you down.
Yeah. I wonder how close you would want to be in the ship. Like 4 miles seems
Close
pretty
as you
close.
can be, man. Except with it out at landing on you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd want to be a mile away. Just because coming in, you would feel like it would be too close.
You'd want to be a mile away if you're the astronauts. Get us out of this fucking capsule.
I guess it depends on which position you're in.
Yeah, so the thing ends up making splashdown. The inflatable, there's like a inflatable ring that comes up around it to keep it floating, and then these big 3 buoys on top in case the ring fails and it starts to sink. And then there's a life raft that actually deploys once they open the door, because all of these landings are scheduled to be water landings. That's just how they're all planned out.
Has to be.
So they end up getting all of them end up getting out into the life raft and are sitting there. I'm trying to kind of figure out what it would be like to go through all that and then to get out on the life raft and look around and be able to see the ship that's picking you up right there and already have the helicopters on their way out to you and just be like, oh shit. Like that was close.
You did pretty good.
Yeah.
Not to mention going from a 40-degree capsule into eventually enough heat, but still not very warm because it's only been a certain amount of time. And then you land just southeast of American Samoa in this beautiful tropical climate.
They said, I think when they opened the door, because it was still so cold and the condensation, everything inside, that it released like that mixture of the hot air and the cold air. You could visibly see like the frost.
Wow.
Like in the temperature, like coming out of the capsule.
Huh.
But they end up, recovered. They get, I want to say Lovell sends Haise up first to the helicopter because he's not in great shape. Like you said, it developed into a kidney infection just in that amount of time. And then he sends up Swigert as the commander. He's like, I think a commander should always be the last one to step off the ship.
Yeah.
And they get him back to the Iwo Jima.
They would end up staying the night on the ship before they would fly into Pago Pago, American Samoa. Sounds like an awesome place. So nice they named it twice. Then the next day, before they were, that's where they landed that next day. I guess flew into and landed the next day. Then they would end up flying out to Hawaii to meet Nixon. The day after that, they would receive the Presidential Medals of Freedom. I don't think he said I'm not a crook at this point in time, but he was probably developing it right around this speech.
This is a medal, and I am not a crook.
They would end up flying back to Houston the next day after that. Just, you gotta think you would be so fucking tired of flying and getting in a very small confined space. Maybe you feel better because you know you're not going up that far, but just being in another compact space like that for so much time. Because again, you're sleeping on a ship that night, pretty tight quarters. Then you got to get on a plane.
Dude, you are getting staterooms.
Yeah,
You're getting
naval vessel though.
Yeah, technically, I believe you're still an officer as an astronaut, or you can still serve as an officer. But after what these guys went through, you don't think a captain or someone else on there is being like, take this.
I'd want to sleep out on the deck, I think.
It is wide open. Like, can you set the bed up out here?
Yeah. Just feel the air. Steak dinner. I think they said collectively Lovell says that he lost 12 pounds in that time by himself. I think they said collectively they lost about 15 pounds, which, again, is a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
But when they were up there and you have freeze-dried food, they had hot dogs, I guess. But it was cold enough that before they could eat the hot dogs, they all froze.
Yeah.
So at one point in time, Lovell went to bite into it, and he couldn't bite into it, and he pulled it away, and he just smacked it up against one of the rails,
Ding,
and it
ding,
just started
ding.
clinking, and both the other guys started laughing.
Do you think all of them at one point were just sitting there with frozen hot dogs, just trying to de-thaw them in their mouths?
Gnawing on them,
yeah.
shoving them in like their armpits and like
Trying
their
to
knee
warm them up
pits,
a little bit.
whatever you could do to try to
Yeah.
get that meat down. You would think after such a catastrophic failure that maybe and again, there's congressional investigations. They're looking into it. This is when they figure out the wires that the Teflon had burned off of in the
We never
testing in the
explained
fan.
that.
Oh, we didn't?
Oh my God.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Jesus. So what actually caused it is they point out two things. One thing is just to kind of, maybe a structural weakness in it. The other thing is to point out what actually caused the explosion. So the company that actually built these fuel tanks, when they were being constructed like 18 months prior to the launch on like the production line and they were moving them, one of the oxygen tanks was actually dropped a mere 2 inches. But it's an insanely lightweight titanium sphere.
So titanium is very light.
That also has fans and components and everything like that inside it. They end up sending it to install it on the command service module. And of course, they're doing testing on it and everything to make sure that the fans work, to make sure that the heaters inside them work. They're able to de-thaw that for the fans to be able to mix it up. The heater that they were testing during one of the testing phases, they left the heater on for too long. And because of that, the wires that are connected to the fans on the inside are only rated for a certain amount of heat.
They're coated with Teflon, just like a pan.
Yeah. And the heater was left on long enough to where it melted some of the Teflon on the wires that were controlling the fan. And those wires were suspended and actually in the environment where the oxygen was. So it exposes the interior of the wire. When they went to go turn that thing on after that 90 seconds, you just have a spark going on in there. And as soon as that thing caught and was able to go and build up enough to blow or to catch that oxygen,
it's a bomb.
Boom. And so they were able to go and track it back to that. Of course, like with any of the flights, I think what they said was for the next mission, which you're going to mention they took their time, right? They added 2 additional fuel cells or fuel tanks. One of them was oxygen, the other was hydrogen. They made sure to put in a 400 amp hour battery in there for them to use for emergencies. And they were able to make all of these improvements and modifications in a very short span, because when was Apollo 14 taken off?
January 31st, 1971. We didn't even wait a year.
No. 7 months? 8 months?
Yep. Was that April to April? It'd be 8 months. So yeah, 9 months.
What are you feeling as that crew? I mean, you'd have to feel more good than bad, because you're sitting there thinking, this is never going to be overlooked again, and nothing like this is going to be allowed to happen again. And now they're adding in more redundancies and backups just in case something happens.
Well, the funny thing, my mind immediately went to they always say that the safest time to fly is right after a crash, just because of the odds of how many planes fly, that there would be that many crashes that close together.
And everyone now being their attention to detail, they still have that sharpness.
But at the same time, if 1 in every 6 million planes crash, there's no way that there's going to be 6 million planes in between then. Like, the odds are great that it's not going to happen that close together.
Yeah.
But when you're the only business in town, the next flight up isn't going to be very safe when all of the flights before you have had these issues. Like, you're always going to run into something. It's just, how bad is it going to be? Are we going to get struck by lightning on takeoff? Are we going to have the fuel shortage trying to get to the moon? Is the oxygen tank going to explode? Like, what's going to happen next?
There was always a feeling of, in every mission, something unexpected is going to go wrong. And I think, I don't know if Lovell actually said it or pointed it out, but he was saying, when they were actually first launching and they ran into that issue on the second stage booster where that middle engine, that number 5 engine cut out. And after they were like, no, we're still all a go, keep going. And after they got up and everything was cool, he was just like, well, we've had our technical issue, for the mission.
And then the bang happened.
But there was a quote that one of the guys, I think it was toward the end of that Apollo 13, that 13 seconds to the moon or whatever it was, that podcast,
BBC
which is
one.
fantastic. It's by the BBC. If, this didn't scratch the total itch and you want to maybe get a little bit more detailed, they have interviews with, I think, with Lovell, and then
damn near.
I mean, the dedicated one, like the bonus ones.
Lovell is still alive.
Yeah.
Lovell's 97 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Space must not age you?
I don't know. They went through a wormhole, or something like that, when
possibly
they were on the other side of the moon. But they were interviewing one of the flight controllers, or one of the guys from one of the back rooms, and they're like, they were calling us heroes. I don't like that term. What we were a group of people with a little bit of knowledge of physics, a little bit of knowledge of math, and a little bit of knowledge of science that worked all together and were able to, bring these guys home.
Yeah, it's pretty modest, I would say.
That comes from working in an environment in which you are acutely aware of what you don't know, because your strength is to know everything about one thing.
Yeah.
And everyone around you has that same mindset of knowing everything about their one thing. And if they need something about your thing, they are not afraid to ask you. And it's just this collective group that zero ego, it seems like, at least in when you get on that desk, zero ego there. But yeah, like the interviews with those guys that they were just talking about, did you have doubts? No, it wasn't. We couldn't have doubts because that would have affected the way that we were doing our jobs. He's like, if someone asked me and I proposed something, I would not propose it unless I was 100% sure. So when they asked me, yeah, I'm 100% sure that thing was going to work. Because the moment you come to somebody and be like, I think we got a 70% chance of this actually working out. No, that wasn't going to cut it.
There were multiple times that Capcom, after they would perform a burn or something like that, Capcom would reassure them and they would say, we're 100% optimistic that this is going to work. Like, they just kept reassuring them. Mm-hmm. And hilariously enough, it might have been that interview on 13 Seconds with Lovell. They had asked him if today he feels like his life was ever in danger, because in all of the interviews that they did post re-entry, once they got him off, every time he was asked if he ever thought that he was going to die, he goes, no, I never ever thought that, even for a second. Yeah. And then they ask him all of these years later in this interview, and they go, did you ever think you were going to die? He goes, pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
He was in that mode to where he had to tell everybody 100% confidence, I wasn't going to die. But then when he's so far away from it and he can be truthful, he's like, yeah, I thought I was going to die for sure.
These are the guys who loved the space program so much and didn't want to see anything happen to it, and wanted to see it to continue and see their legacy continue, that they weren't going to do anything to damage the reputation of them. You could not be in that situation without having fear and doubt and all of that. But for them to kind of just, bury that down when they had to do these interviews and being like, no, like, these guys obviously knew what they're doing. They got us back, didn't they? There was never a doubt that these guys were going to be able to figure something out.
The other thing too, and I'm sure if you listen to any other podcast about Apollo 13, they're going to talk about this. So we're going to talk about it too. Oh God, I lost it for a second.
Oh my God,
as soon as I was saying it, I was trying to get the words out, and it was
like, no, not you too.
This is considered NASA's like shining moment. Like, the greatest thing that they have ever done was bringing somebody, but not landing on the moon. It was bringing them back from such a big failure. I 100% agree with that. Yeah, for sure.
That consensus is 100% accurate, because for me, the Manhattan Project for me is a little bit different, because that involved a lot of trial and error. That involved a lot of failure, and that involved a long period of time for the development of that, and vast worldwide knowledge and resources.
It also came with a certain amount of finality that I think is pretty tough to to put into.
This was a very condensed period of time of 4 to 5 days in which these guys showed what type of ingenuity and adaptability and just creativity that human beings are capable of at the peak of certain fields. That to me is just like how, of course, this should be the pinnacle. This should be your shining moment because you guys made people look at it and say, oh, it's much hard. It showed a level of respect that I think had really been lost.
Yeah, I mean, and to go with that, we talked about Apollo 13 not being nationally televised, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess who televised Apollo 14?
Everyone.
Everybody.
Yeah.
So they didn't necessarily respect how great an achievement this was. It was the public and everybody wanting to see another potential failure.
I want to hope that that's not it was, but in whatever way that they came around to it, I do think in a way what happened to them did kind of save the space program.
Yeah, for a certain amount of time. And I want to say it was 17 and 18 that ended up getting canceled just out of fear that something else could go wrong.
Yeah.
But they still continued to launch after this. And then after that, we get into the actual space shuttle program, which I want to say Swigert, it was either Swigert or Haise, played a very big part in
designing the space shuttle.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be a fun one to get into.
Absolutely. Well, one of them won't be. But.
Yeah. All right, man. You got anything else?
No, I'm so glad to get back into space.
I know.
We're going to put it on a shelf again for a little while, and then once we get back to that, and eventually when we talk about the Challenger, but even just the space shuttle program, we're going to be right back into this. Holy shit, they're doing this a different way.
Trying to figure out how the space station was constructed and how it stays in fucking orbit. It's going to be bonkers. All right, guys. Well, hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.